Yo, what is up, Exiles? In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a monk build that's going to play a lot more like a sorceress. So this is basically what I'm calling a wizard build. It is a full caster monk build, and this was inspired by the sorceress build that I kind of started out working on in this game. That build revolved very heavily around Ember Fusillade and the Raging Spirits, and the fact that these auto-detonate themselves and instantly call down automatic meteors. And so this video is going to be focused on basically the leveling progression journey, like going from 1 to the beginning of you starting to map. And on this character, I just did my very first session of maps starting at tier 3 a day or two ago, and I actually live streamed that on this channel. So if you want to see like 8 hours of gameplay of the build in action, like from my very first map on this character all the way to we got to like tier 5 at the end. You can kind of, that'll give you like a fuller scope of the gameplay if you're trying to see, exactly how it feels. And we learned a couple things in there, and shout out to Blades for stopping by and chatting with us. But that led to a couple changes that we're going to sort of implement as we're getting into the end game mapping here. And the main one of those, as you can see from my buffs in the top left, I'll show you kind of the full build setup, and as you scale towards the end, you can basically add 2 unset rings for extra skill slots. You can add 2 more cast on minion deaths with their own comets in them, and now we're getting this triple crazy cast on minion death effect that's proccing literally all the time with what we're doing with Ember Fusillade and Flame Wall. And so we are just going to get the whole idea behind this is when I was playing the build on Sorceress, I was getting a ton of value out of this setup. Even before these 2 support gems and before I ranked up the cast on minion death, just cast on minion death right when I was able to run it with Comet and Firestorm felt fantastic on my sorceress with this build. It was proccing very often, like way more often than any of the other cast on gems. And the way that works is basically we're using Raging Spirits, which spawn from all our fire spells, and Fusillade combined with Flame Wall spawn a ton of these, and then they're auto-detonating themselves. So after they exist for 5 seconds, they will blow up. So they basically ignite everything around them as they're ticking down, inflict fire exposure, and then explode at the end of that, all for like based on percentage max life. When those minions explode, they count energy towards cast on minion death. So with that working so good with the sorceress build, it kind of inspired me when I realized that Invoker Monk in their skill tree has these nodes in their mastery, the Soul Springs Eternal mainly as the main one. This kind of looking at these nodes up here kind of inspired me to try to make a similar build, but go all in on meta energy and stuff auto casting. And we're going to eventually be working our way down here to this other little energy node. But this setup in the skill tree looks very similar to my setup on the sorceress. So on the sorceress, I started here up through here, but if you kind of zoom out and look at this part, I went all the way down, got all this monk juice. We got this elemental node first. This is like one of the most powerful clusters for elemental casters on the board, I think. But basically, I was down here getting all this monk stuff anyways, because it's all so juicy for the build. And so I decided, hey, let's take the sorceress variation one way and really focus on crits and elemental storm, her ascendancy mechanic as a stormweaver. Let's do another build that's a variant where we can really focus on meta energy casting and use Invoker Monk for that, because they're actually going to be the best class at using meta skills because of this energy stuff, as well as the fact that they can stack, gain extra damage on top, an extra 20% from these 2 nodes with Unbound Avatar, which is what we're going to be building into with our 5th and 6th points. We're going to go 5, 6, then we're going to go 7, 8. And at the end, we're going to get I Am the Blizzard. And actually, we'll talk about this more in depth, but on the leveling journey, at the beginning of the setup, you're going to want to go these 2 first. And you're only going to want to get the Soul Springs Eternal when you really get your cast on energy stuff online as you start to get closer into endgame. And we're going to go through the skill tree kind of more in depth in that section, but I kind of want to just give you a preview of like where the idea for the build came from, kind of what it's about, how it's kind of working. And so we're going to talk through the skill gems, we're going to talk through the skill tree, and we're also going to talk through the gear. And I can kind of just show you guys everything up front here. I'll do like a preview at the end as well, where I kind of, show you the setup in total. But like, here's kind of where my character's at right now. I think we got to end game at like 67, and so the 8-hour stream I did the other day was me playing from like 67 to 74, progressing up to from tier 3 to tier 5 maps. And like, here's the gear I'm working with. I actually just did some nice upgrades this morning from some stuff I had stashed from that journey. But it's a huge amount about the spirit stack. And so we have a big scepter on our offhand that we've had for a while that we crafted, but the malice is going to help. But basically the scepter with the necklace, with the chest, all having spirit rolls, like working your way toward that, is going to basically give you, you know, the spirit you need to run this multi-cast on setup. So we have one cast on minion death, we have one cast on freeze, or sorry, we have 3 cast on minion deaths, we have 1 cast on freeze, and then we have a 100 spirit archmage buffing all those auto casted meteors. All are going to be benefiting from this massive extra archmage damage, which we are really building into, scaling our mana pool at almost 1300 already. And then the last spirit buff we have active is Raging Spirits, and that's kind of the source of all these minion deaths that are happening, like feeding these comets. So basically by the end of that stream, once I realized you could socket in multiple cast on minion death gems, shout out Blades again, the build just started going turbo with so many comments dropping. And so I'm super excited to stream the next sesh and push deeper into endgame, especially now that we got a couple gear upgrades through. I'll just finish like mousing over this stuff real quick for you. We got the 2 unset rings. Our gear right now is energy shield evasion. We're going to look through the gear in detail too, but for the gear, you're really going to want to, I think it's better, it feels better to go full energy shield leveling up. And right around when you're getting to like the 60 range, like coming towards, you know, the end of Cruel, that's when you want to start looking to transition into evasion energy shield gear. And the reason that is because we're not deep enough in our skill tree, and we don't have enough juicy rolls on our gear with big you know, stats like this 22 int here, the 30 int here. We don't have that on like early gear. We have much smaller rolls, so you're not going to have as much total attributes to try to cover both, right? You're going to need to be scaling your int all the way up to like be maxing your spell gems. Like, you know, all these guys, you're going to want to be kind of like max scaling int. So you're not going to have the dex required to wear the evasion rating gear combo, and it's also not as good in my opinion either. Like, all you need to do as a caster leveling up is survive one shots. A huge barrier is what's going to let you do that. Evading is kind of insignificant until you're getting into endgame, having many more monsters, you know, kind of in play on the map. And in the end, energy shield evasion, I think, is probably going to be the most powerful defensive combo in the game, especially for this type of class, because if you think about the way energy shield functions, you have to give it some time after you get hit to recharge, right? And you can actually build into that. Like, we're at 100% delay modifier, so when we get hit, it actually takes 2 seconds for our energy shield to start recharging instead of 4. But what evasion does, if you put evasion on top of that, all of a sudden you're avoiding hits that are coming at you, right? So that literally gives your energy shield more chances to restart and start regenning, because as soon as you get hit, it stops your energy shield regen, right? And so evasion energy shield, I think, really does feel good as you're getting into endgame, but you, in my opinion, you want to start kind of full barrier, and then as you're getting towards the end of Cruel, start scaling it all over to evasion gear. So I've been really trying to figure out the best way to sort of format these videos. So what I'm going to try in this one is going through the spell rotation with you here, kind of explaining everything in general. Then we're going to take it into a map, and I'm going to kind of show you that live. Then we'll kind of come back and go through exactly in detail all the skill gems and the logic behind the support gems. And then we will also take a closer look at the skill tree, and I'll talk about a couple of gearing concerns, and that'll be kind of what you need to set up the build and, you know, get it rolling for you if you're interested in running it. And I do have a Mobalytics link in the description. If you're interested in kind of staying up to date with changes to the build, that's what I'm going to be continuing to update as I take this build deeper into endgame. So save that link or, you know, favorite it or whatever on Mobalytics if you're looking to, you know, kind of follow along and see how it's doing. I am going to be trying to live stream as much of that as I can. So if it's not on this channel, it's going to be, I might end up making a new channel where I can kind of just daily stream PoE without it sort of, you know, messing with stuff. Okay, so like we mentioned at the beginning, kind of the whole build is revolving around Ember Fusillade, and in my opinion, this is like one of the coolest, if not the coolest spells in the game. because of kind of the nuance of how it works and how different it feels from everything else. And one of the main things I mean by that is it's a very unique spell in that when you cast it as a very fast cast time, but as soon as you're done casting, like it won't shoot at all until you stop casting. And then when you stop casting, there's this period of about a second that you can bring down with a support gem, where after that they will shoot out. And you can have, as the gem scales, you can have up to 8 embers. So if we look at our Ember Fusillade gem here, and we can see if we look at the Ember Fusillade gem, it says hover duration is 1.3 seconds. This brings it down to 0.9, and there's like a visual bug where it's not showing that right now in the tooltip. But it was literally yesterday or in stream, I checked this, and it's giving us about... This 30% skill effect duration is giving us about 0.4 seconds off the hover duration. So with this slotted in there, it's going to put us at about 0.9 hover. And actually at level 16 on my Ember Fusillade now, I can have up to 9 embers. And so it starts at 6, but you can see as you scale the gem, you're going to get more embers. And the other really important thing to realize about it is every consecutive ember does 5% more damage than the previous ember. So what that means is you almost always want to try to let them shoot when you have the maximum amount, because that last ember is going to deal 5% plus 5% plus 5%, you know, etc., all the way up, you know, until whatever you're at, 6, 7, 8, 9 embers. And if you end up investing some quality gems into this after 4 of the gem cutter prisms, you can get this additional quality effect, which is going to give the embers 2% extra damage. So it's actually going to be 7% increase between each ember instead of 5. So basically the last ember in the sequence has a big damage increase compared to the first ember. So we always want to try to shoot a fully loaded ember gun here. And the other really important thing is that you can sort of animation cancel this. And this is the other thing that makes it feel really good, where basically as you're cruising along or in between fights or as you're kiting, you can always basically be charging up your fusillades without any sort of penalty to your movement. Because once you get it going, you can just kind of have this automation cancel. So you can literally stack them up and hold them, and you can sort of carry this into fights where, you know, you're kind of rolling up on a pack and you flame wall, and all of a sudden you have, you know, you basically start engages on packs of mobs with a fully loaded max fusillades shooting through a flame wall, and that's going to result in a bunch of skull spawning, which is going to auto meteor firestorm like we just saw there. And when we get into the actual mapping, you'll kind of start to see how fast these cast on minion deaths are ticking, because it kind of starts to go turbo. So kind of the implication of running Ember Fusillade as our kind of like main spell is that we kind of need, we want to build all these up, and then we need to not cast that for about a second, right? So in that gap when we're not casting Fusillade, that's when we're doing literally everything else. So the spell rotation in general is building your Fusillades, casting, you know, literally everything else that you're doing, but almost immediately when those Fusillades shoot, you want to start building them back up again. And so it's a constant kind of cycling of, you know, Fusillades, and as soon as they're done shooting, you start to build them back up. And because we're running additional projectiles here, like the full setup, we have about like a third, like a 30% chance or so to spawn 3 of these per cast instead of 1. And so you'll find oftentimes if you're holding it like this, you'll actually get to, and we're also building heavily into cast speed. And I think this is not updating for some reason, but if we look at the cast speed on here, it's, yeah, this is like for, let me see if this fixes it. I don't know, this tooltip's bugged. Like Arcane Tempo makes the cast speed go down. We're literally at like 0.17 cast speed on this. We are definitely not at 0.4. But you can see we can cast literally, we can get up to a full stack of 8 in about a second. And so you basically have a second to build them, unless you're already built up from, you know, kind of like pre-building them. But you basically kind of, and in combat, you know, you can kind of choose if you have space, you can do this and just like get them all, hold it down and get them all. But if like stuff's chasing you or it's sketchy, you want to constantly be doing this. So you're kind of, you know, once you're at your 8, let that shoot while you're doing something else. And then you're kind of building them back up again, letting them shoot, doing something else, building them back up again. And so the rotation, you really want to think about the rotation like fully on Ember Fusillade. And, you know, basically it just kind of, you know, kind of carrying your main pump. And we're really supporting that by Flame Wall. So not only is Flame Wall giving us all these skulls, it's giving us guaranteed ignite. All the skulls are giving us guaranteed ignite with fire exposure. But it's also letting both of our projectiles, both our Frostbolt, Scatter, Wild Shards, combined with our Fusillades, shoot through and get that big bonus extra fire damage coming from Flame Wall. So in general, after your fusillading, the first thing you want to do when you let this go is Flame Wall. You really want to try to shoot most of your Fusillades through the Flame Wall. So that's kind of the first kind of pairing, you know, is Fusillade with Flame Wall. And then you can kind of think about another spell pairing we have that's similar to that with Frostbolt, Frostwall. And so basically, this is a huge chunk of our kind of crowd control, defensives, mana regen, and ability to freeze. And we have a crazy amount of energy getting fed into our cast on freeze gem because we have it socketed with cold snap. Now cold snap has a half-second cooldown, one of the fastest base cast times in the game, probably besides Ember Fusillade at 0.4. And so this thing, these energy gems are all based on the cast time of the spells you put in them. So because this is such a low cast time, this doesn't require very much energy to proc at all. And then if we add all the bonus energy we're getting from these nodes in our skill tree, this starts to proc a lot. And the really cool thing about running only Cold Snap with Cast on Freeze is that when it gets to 100%, if nothing is around to detonate, it won't just waste it. It'll literally hold the 100% until there's something in range that's frozen to detonate, and then it will blow up. And the other kind of synergy here is that our Frost Wall counts as a target for Cold Snap to detonate. And the Frost Wall ends up being a significant chunk of our damage when we have big groups of mobs and on bosses. And this spell like really surprised me in kind of its potential. And it feels really good in tandem with Frostbolt. And that's basically because we have a combination of things that can freeze, and both those things together, the Frostbolt creating a huge amount of chilled ground and a bunch of freeze from glaciation, and Frostbolt already having a really high, freeze buildup, like kind of base. When we throw Scattershot and Wild Shards in there, we can just get a turbo amount of ice out. And when you consider all this chilled ground and everything getting frozen that's coming like up onto it, combined with the ability to zone and freeze more stuff with Frost Walls, you kind of have a crazy amount of potential to not only deal huge damage and burst stuff out, but also to protect yourself with the wall, and also to give a crazy amount of energy to this cast on freeze gem, which is basically just going to be detonating constantly. And if something around nearby isn't frozen, it's going to detonate wall chunks. We have the wall chunks set up with a massive amount of area of effect, so they cascade, so you get 3 walls per cast, and then they have 40% more area of effect. And we're also slotting in Font of Mana, and this actually does an incredible amount from our mana, because as long as one wall chunk survives, you see our feet are glowing blue, we have this nice 40% mana increase that goes a long way with Archmage. And as soon as you get Archmage, as soon as you have the spirit to get Archmage, pathing up into this, which you don't want to do at first, you don't need this at first. We'll talk about more about this in skill tree, but as soon as you get Archmage, coming up here and getting these 5 points to get this reduction in mana cost on skills actually makes such a huge difference in how good the Archmage energy feels. So as soon as you're looking to run Archmage, when you have that extra spirit coming up on endgame, that's definitely, if you have 5 points somewhere you can pull and go back into them later, you really want to try to bring this conservative casting online, like right around the same time you're grabbing Archmage. The other really cool thing about this cast on freeze setup is if we throw in Cold Mastery, it not only gives a level to cast on freeze, it also gives a level to Cold Snap. So we're basically getting double value out of the Cold Mastery socketed into the cast on freeze, and I will eventually put some quality into this one once I have the Prism, so that we can get it to the 15% energy gained. If we look at my cast on minion death, that is at the 20% extra energy gained, and so we're at 62% increase energy gain on this cast on minion death, plus another 35% here, so 97% increased energy on cast on minion death, combined with 24% more up here, plus the ability for it to refund its energy a part of the time, plus all this crazy extra like 100% extra skill damage on them on the triggered spells, plus this extra skill damage here, so like over 100% extra pump on everything that's getting auto triggered. And yeah, it's just like, especially like those last couple maps I did in that stream the other night, it just starts to feel really good. So in general, after you're fusillading and then you throw down your flame wall, that's when you want to frostbolt like 1 or twice. And you're kind of looking to use your frost wall as either zone control or to detonate. So in general, like the mistake you want to avoid is using frost wall first. Because if you use frost wall first, it's going to basically block your embers like that. and you're not going to get really any DPS out of the actual hits of your Fusillade. So instead of doing that, what you really want to do is kind of have damage already be coming out, because if you already preloaded your Fusillades, if you already flame rolled, if you're already frostbolting, when you throw your walls out, you have all this energy stored that's going to auto detonate stuff. You have your Firestorm detonating the pillars, you have your Cold Snap detonating the pillars, you have your Meteor, your Comets coming down, smashing all those, and anytime one of those gets destroyed, it does AoE frost damage to everything around it and freezes itself. So we have crazy freezing from our Wild Shard Scattershot Frostbolt. We also have crazy freezing from our Frostwall. And the other really cool thing Frostwall does is give us utility, where if we need to, we can actually block mobs with it. And we can actually, the only time you do kind of want to do it first is what I kind of was learning in that end game mapping session, where once you're kind of starting to push into harder content, you're actually going to want to maybe use the wall sometimes to stop that initial charge of mobs. Like when mobs get on your screen, especially if they're like the melee ones that rush you, you basically want to kind of, you know, you could like preemptively wall to protect yourself from that initial, you know, engage that they have. And so that's kind of the main time you want to frost wall early. And I found myself doing that much more as I was like getting toward, you know, into the tier 4 maps and stuff's getting harder and harder than I was kind of like leveling up and stuff. A lot of the times leveling up, what I would do is I wouldn't cast Frostwall a ton, but if you get like an array of Frostbolts out, if you throw your Frostwall down, the Frostbolts will actually pass through, and especially if they're ignited like that from traveling through your flame wall, they'll pass through the pillars, and multiple Frostbolts will do enough damage to ignite the pillars themselves. So like if you already have a volley, you know, of Frostbolts out, you can like basically throw your wall where they're going and kind of preemptively like blow it up, or at least damage it to where like if one or two things hit it, they'll just like start to detonate. And so that's kind of leveling up. The main way I was using it is kind of, you know, feeding it into my Frostbolt volley like that, and then kind of restarting my rotation, and then just like kind of rotating it like that. And that was like feeling really good. The main thing that's like annoying about Frostwall, especially when you have Cascade in the area on it, is like blocking yourself. So like, you know, if you're trying to run here and you Frostwall and then you can't get through, a lot of times you can dodge through. So always try to dodge, because sometimes it'll like dodge, like let you through, but it can be, because of the lifetime on it too, it can be slightly annoying to pathing, but only if you're kind of like overcasting it. So keep that in mind with Frostwall. So that's really the core of the spell rotation, right? If we're just sitting there pumping, we're fusillading, then we flame ball Frostwall, and then we kind of Frostwall when we need it. We do it to zone, we do it to like where blow up, and it's best to do it when we already have damage coming out like this, like I was just talking about, because this damage is kind of, you know, auto detonating these pillars on its own. And we're not even seeing any of the cast on freeze procs, but if we were hitting mobs, our cast on freeze would be building as well. And this is also going to be popping wall chunks as well as mobs. If it pops a frozen mob, that AoE damage is going to pop wall chunks. So you have a bunch of crazy synergy between AoE frost blasting, between cast on freeze, cold snap, frostwall, and frostbolt. So besides those kind of 4 main spells, the only other one that is like core is Lightning Warp. And this is basically going to give us the ability to get shocked ground, because we don't have a reliable way to shock stuff otherwise. And this is also really useful for mobility. It's also really useful just for the execute, which is very strong. And so I'm a huge fan of the spell Lightning Warp kind of overall, but it's going to basically give us the lightning we need to proc Echoing Thunder, to give us the extra increased damage on mobs from them being shocked. Like all the good stuff shocking does, we can kind of get it automatically by getting our executes through. And then beyond that, we don't really have to worry about like running any other sort of like lightning spells to try to get shock. And then we also obviously have Archmage online as well. And this is going to basically like take a look at our Ember Fusillade damage. Like if we look at our total damage and what percentage of that is lightning, that huge chunk that's lightning is coming from Archmage and our max mana, right? So we can see Ember Fusillade's at 6,880 DPS right now, and the lightning damage portion is 415 to 620. So let's see if I just toggle off Archmage. Our Fusillade goes down to 4,587. So like over 2,000 down, like 2,300 something down, right? DPS wise. And if we pull up the details, we can basically see all of our lightning damage is gone, or a huge chunk of it at least, right? So Archmage is giving us, with this much max mana, Archmage is giving us almost 65% extra DPS, or damage as extra lightning, which is like after the damage equation, as, you know, pump. And the other really cool thing about Archmage is it procs off all of your cast on. So every comet that's coming out, your cold snap, everything that's getting auto casted from our meta energy is benefiting from the 60+%. And it's going to be even higher as we continue to scale our mana, right? We're basically getting 5% every 100 max mana we get. So being close to 1300, we're almost at like 65%, gaining extra damage as lightning. Okay, so that's like the 5 main spells of the core rotation. We have the 2 fire spells, Fusillade Flame Wall. We have the 2 frost spells, Frost Wall, and then we also have our Lightning Warp Execute to give us Shocked Ground and, keep everything with that debuff. The final thing we can do is a Sigil of Power weapon swap, and this is much easier than it sounds. You can make it happen automatically. So all you have to do for this is find any offhand with Sigil of Power, and I actually meant to do this a while ago, but I forgot, but it literally doesn't matter what stats are on this staff. Literally, all you need it for is the Sigil of Power. So what you want to do is try to find, you just keep the most current like Sigil of Power level bramble or staff that you're able to equip on. And I'm trying to see if I have one that's like just, even if it's just like a blue, but I need like, see how mine is level 58, level 14 Sigil of Power? I need to upgrade that to like a level 16 Sigil of Power, because all that matters on this staff is that we are never sort of using it to cast stuff. We're only using it to throw out our Sigil of Power. And the way to set up that to happen automatically, all you have to do is your Sigil of Power, you don't have to mess with it. It's gonna, when you press that, it's gonna automatically pull out your staff. So that's the weapon swap to staff happening automatically. Then for every spell you actually cast, what you want to do is look at your weapon sets, and you can actually uncheck the weapon set that's the staff. And so we can see my staff is on 2. So basically what I want to do is I want to make Ember Fusillade only cast with weapon set 1. I want to make Flame Wall only cast with weapon set 1. Same thing with Frostbolt, same thing with Frost Wall, same thing with Lightning Warp, right? So everything we're casting is auto swapping back to our big Spirit Wand Scepter setup, right? Which is what we need for all of our buffs, all of our cast-ons. So we always want to have our Wand Scepter out. The only time we want to pull our staff out is to quickly throw down a Sigil of Power. And, based on how much spirit you have when you swap over from your scepter, you can toggle which ones of these you want on. But to be honest, that doesn't matter a ton because you're instantly swapping back. So what that looks like in action, you're playing with your wand, you're casting, you're doing all your rotation and stuff. And it's like, when you have, really what you want to do is like, if there's a spot where you can set up to blast, like if you're going to have a second to pump, or if stuff's looking a little sketchy and you need like an area to play around, like you want to try to Sigil of Power. And this is an insanely strong ability for being kind of on like a weapon swap, because you can see I threw it out there. As soon as I press Ember Fusillade, see how it just auto swapped back? And that'll be true with any spell I press now. And I'm not weapon swapping, it's auto weapon swapping, because all my spells only will cast with weapon set 1 now, right? So that's kind of the way you can set up. And I think this is strong for any caster build. Literally any caster build where you're not running an offhand, rock a Sigil of Power staff, set up this web swap, and it just gives you a huge amount of extra damage value, especially if you have a heavy mana build like this one. We pull this thing up to 4 stacks very quickly. The power level of this sigil on the ground scales based on how much mana you spend in it. So after you've spent a certain amount of mana, it'll be at 4 stacks, and it's going to be giving you a turbo amount of extra spell power. We can see with the sigil up, if I'm casting out of it, the stacks up here, it just got to 4. If we look at our Fusillade now from when we're almost at 12,000 DPS with that sigil. Look at it drop from there. So a fully stacked sigil will literally double your DPS, which is kind of insane. And the other thing we can do with it is put these support gems in it to make it sort of a defensive zone we can play around. So Unbreakable is a really cool one. I really like this combo because one of the most annoying things as caster as you're kind of scaling up is getting stunned. So I do carry a stun charm around me. This is the main one I'm rocking if I'm pushing content not comfortable, or if stuff's like sketchy, I'll have this one on. If there's any kind of freezing around, I will swap it to this, like hot swap it. If I'm comfortable and just kind of blasting, I'll swap it to the rarity. So I literally carry these 3 charms and hot swap them. But to the point of the stun thing, like if you have the stun one on, or even if, if you don't, what this does is when we cast our sigil, it's going to give us 200% extra stun threshold while we're in it, right? But then it's also going to give us the ability for our energy shield to if we do get stunned, these two things happen. So this gives us more stun thresholds so we can stand and cast in our circle. When we inevitably do get stunned, which is going to happen most of the time, these two are going to proc. So it's going to make our energy shield recharge begin immediately and not be interrupted by damage for 2 seconds. So it's going to basically give us like free energy gen that keeps going even if we keep getting hit. And then we're also going to kind of knock everything back automatically with the wind wave, which is this, kind of AoE knockback on hit effect. So slotting your sigil of power with these just kind of gives you a really good defensive setup where while you're in here and casting, you have more stun threshold. If for some reason you do get stunned, which will happen, you're going to generate energy shield and you're going to auto knock everything back with wind wave, right? And so I've really liked that sigil of power gem setup. And we can kind of see now that's kind of the chunk of our what we're actually casting. We have that weapon swap on sigil of power, then we have the 2 fire spells we talked about, we have the 2 frost spells we talked about, then we have the lightning warp. And beyond that, we have all of our auto casting spirit stuff, right? We have the raging spirits we talked about that are giving us the auto detonating heads that trigger the cast on minion death. We have the first cast on minion death. This is the one we're really building into. We're doing Comet and Firestorm, and we're supporting it with impetus and energy retention when we can, as you kind of scale this gem up and get more sockets. And as we're progressing like deeper and we're starting to get, more and more spirit, what we want to do is look to transition to these 2 unset rings and pull in 2 more cast on minion deaths for 2 more comets. And this is like the kind of the icing on the cake, the extra juice at the end that's going to really make this build pump simply because of the quantity we are proccing cast on minion death. And it's going to pump even harder when we have Unbound Avatar and Blizzard back, and even more harder when we make our way down here finally and are able to get these extra energy nodes with the extra damage and dynamism, kind of the last big meta energy oriented node nearby here. Beyond that, I have a Volatile Dead wand that I literally don't end up casting Volatile Dead, like hardly at all. I just have it on my bar just in case. These are like placeholders where I'll probably socket these in to other things as I get more gem slots. So don't worry about this Volatile Dead. You can get any kind of wand. The thing you want to look at for a wand is this gain % damage as extra. And that's the same thing we were talking about in the skill tree here. We have 10% here. We had 10% here until we switch it over. We're going to have that back. We have 5% here. We have 5% here. We have another 25% on our wand, and we're getting another 65% lightning from Archmage. So we're stacking basically as much gain percentage extra elemental damage as possible. And beyond that for wand, another really good one is plus to skill ranks. The main thing you want to be careful with plus to skill ranks is if it puts you at a skill level that's too high above where your gear is at and where your mana pool is at, you will not be able to run Archmage. Your spells are going to be taking too much mana versus where your gear is at because you have all these extra ranks that you're not quite supposed to be at yet. Where you will be doing more damage, but you might not have the mana to sustain Archmage. And so, I do think plus spell ranks is really good. I think it's like in the final endgame version, you're really going to want that because that's going to let you're going to have enough mana to support that. But especially early on, if you find something, I do recommend running them in general, but you might just have to, mess with Archmage, not have it on, maybe take a little extra regen in here or something like that. To make the extra spell ranks work. But in the end, this gain percentage of extra elemental damage combined with spell ranks is going to give you your biggest damage increase on your weapon. And like I mentioned, we're going to get deeper into the gear, but just real quick, because it's so relevant to the build, we are doing a similar thing with our scepter, where the main thing we need on our scepter is spirit. And we're really looking for this malice roll as well. We want an omen scepter. And I self-crafted this one. Basically what you want to look out for is any blue scepter, yellow scepter, or white scepter that's an omen scepter. Literally any rarity of omen scepter, you want to grab them all. And if it's just a normal one, basically you want to use the orb of augmentation. So basically like loot every omen scepter you get like all the time. And then when you get, because you're always trying to get a better one of these, it's like so important to the build. So when you get any version, let's say you get a normal one, use a transmutation on it, try to get a spirit roll. If you don't get a spirit roll or anything good, scrap it. If you get a good roll on that, spirit or something tangential, try an augmentation for a second, uncommon roll. If that one's good and you have 2 good looking rolls on a scepter, which is what happened here, it came with this first bait spirit roll. And then I just picked it up as a blue omen scepter. And then I used an orb of augmentation on it. And I got this second spirit roll, the tier 3 one. So it added them together for 55% spirit. Once you have a good looking blue one like that, then you want to use a regal orb on it, take it up to rare. If that's looking good with a 3rd roll and you're happy with the spirit and stuff, that's the point where you want to dump, 3 more exalteds into it, get it fully stacked out, and then also throw that extra quality scaling on it with the Arcanist etchers. And that's going to get you to, you know, basically the most spirit possible. Those Arcanist etchers are going to scale the base spirit value. So with this scepter, literally since like level 42, I've had 186 extra spirit. So really, like, you know, this is a good scepter because the other things support us good as well. The minion health actually helps scale the damage they do from their explosions and igniting. But in general, really the main thing you need is spirit on an Omen Scepter with the Malice. And this is an AoE critical weakness debuff that's going to basically make everything around you have a higher chance to get critically strike. So it's literally just free, you know, free kind of extra damage and DPS that's coming out in an area of effect around us as we're fighting. Dude, it just got so dark in here. Holy. Is that better? That's better. So now that you kind of understand the rotation and kind of the idea behind how it works, we're going to take a look at basically how to play it. So kind of the rotation in action, and you can kind of see some, you know, live gameplay. If you want like a more kind of focused look of this without me talking, check out the end of the live stream. So if you just go to my channel and you go to the live tab and click on that last like 8-hour one, the first Meta Magic Monk one, and go towards the end, like the last couple hours, that's when I had the triple meteor slotted in doing the end game mapping, and you can really kind of see the final power of it there, and we'll kind of try to show a bit of it here. So we just finished our last tier 4 map for the quest at the end of that VOD. So here you can see I'm on the first part of the tier 5 map. So we're going to try our very first tier 5 map together. I'm not going to put any mods on it just because I'm going to be kind of talking and showing you guys stuff, but I just kind of want to show you the, you know, the build in action here and kind of give you a better idea of the rotation. So monster level 70, I'm level 74. We have just this little bit of, you know, extra from the tower nearby, but otherwise just a blank tier 5 waystone. And here's kind of my stats, right? So kind of see I'm at 1400 life, 1700 barriers, 62% evasion. I got nice boosts to these within the last couple levels. We got some nice upgrades coming through. We upgraded our jacket, we upgraded our boots, and we upgraded our gloves, and we upgraded our belt in the last session. So we actually got, and we upgraded our helm. So we literally got full gear upgrade, and we had terrible resistances at the beginning of that run. I had basically no resist rolls on my gear. And this gear gave us at least a little bit to where we're at least positive. We're not quite negative. Fire is just one short here. But we had like negative 28% fire resist. We had like negative 18% cold resist. So now we actually have some real elemental defensives going on. And so, yeah, that's basically the setup. Let's check out Decay. It's actually one of my least favorite maps because how the visual is so bad on what's on the ground. You can't see like poison pools and stuff because all these mushrooms. The other, like the only, like the one real kind of downside about this build is you have so many elemental effects going on that it can be hard to see like enemy elemental effects, or like fire on the ground, poison on the ground, those chaos balls that are chasing you and trying to explode, like all that kind of stuff. Is a bit challenging to see in this build. So if there was a downside, that would be it. Otherwise, I've just been having kind of so much fun with this setup, and I've been playing it enough that it's like a little bit on autopilot for me now. But you can kind of see I'm in general, I'm not going to do it perfectly, but in general, I'm kind of doing all the stuff we talked about. And right there, you saw our Ice Wall can even taunt. So the Ice Wall literally pulls aggro on this guy. Easy, unique out of it. GG. There's your streamer luck right there, even though we're just making a video. I'm just starting out on the streamer journey, so maybe that's that first bit of streamer luck coming through. But yeah, basically we're fusillading, we're shooting our embers through the fusillade, we're covering that gap with frostbolt and frostwall that we talked about, and then we're trying to basically build our embers up like immediately following that. So it's this constant combination of embering, flame wall, and then like that's a bad frostwall. Like, you don't need a frostwall there. That's the kind of one that'll like block you and be annoying. You want to be careful not to overcast Frostwall, especially if you're just kind of crushing stuff. Like the cool way to use Frostwall first is what I talked about. You can use it defensively, where I only casted Frostwall there, 3 of them. Look how much time it sort of bought me in this huge pack of mobs engaging on me, right? Like I have a kind of an eternity now. And what that does is it lets you, it gives you time to set up your sigil, right? And so if we drop our sigil, all of our, let's say I preload my fusillades, before I have my sigil down, right? If we drop our sigil after we have those fusillades loaded, they'll get the damage increase. Like this, they'll be boosted as they come out of there. You know, basically you can like preemptively kind of have them loaded before you throw the sigil down, and then they'll kind of auto cast with a bonus, and you can, you'll have time to get your flame wall up and let them shoot through that as well. And as soon as we're done with that, we're frost bolting, and when it looks good, we're frost walling. And you kind of have to pay attention, but basically you'll see these little blue things that happen on guys as they start to get low. That's basically how you're going to lightning warp. And when you do get an execute and you're able to lightning warp, it's going to give you the ability to create that shocked ground, and we can see everything in this vicinity, right? This big area, see the lightning coming up from the ground here? This big ass circle right here, where we did our lightning warp step, that's all shocked ground. So anything coming into there is going to be shocked, which is it's the debuff to take extra damage from everything, right? So just a really reliable way to shock. The other really cool thing about lightning warp is using it for like the mobility. So a lot of times in sketchy situations, like you'll see me doing it a lot in that stream VOD, especially when maps have like sketchy modifiers, you need to kind of like kite around like and stuff a lot more often. You can literally like lightning warp across the fight to mobs that are low to kind of like, kite everything and keep your distance and like, kind of keep space. And it's just like, it's a really good tool. And the other thing it does, like we saw there, is when you get a warp on something next to your walls, there's enough lightning warp damage coming out that it'll auto detonate your wall. And so you get this like really good feeling, kind of spell combo coming through where your frost walls are getting just like auto detonated by so many different things. And they actually pump, kind of so much damage themselves when those chunks do pop. And because we have it cascaded with the extra area of effect, we can see each wall cast is giving us kind of like maximum value of the amount of explosions we're getting out. The area of effect is making the explosion itself bigger, but on top of that, the wall chunks are bigger, and then we're cascading it. So every wall cast is kind of giving us massive value. And the other thing that's cool about that, besides using it for like the utility mob blocking and like the zoning, like if there was a pack of mobs over here and I'm fighting mobs over here, you can like do that, like wall them off and block them, handle your flank to your right, then turn back left. And, you can really kind of protect your flank with the frost wall. But even because we're throwing up so many pillars, we can see there's a perfect example. See, I have one pillar left that's still giving me mana font. So you literally only need one pillar to exist from this wall to be getting the huge 40% extra damage increase, right? And so as long as you're kind of playing around your wall like this, that mana font is going to have a huge impact on how your Archmage feels. Like, especially at this level, it's just going to make your Archmage feel significantly better, right? As far as the casting, you can see when the comets come down, they are pulling big chunks of my mana. And if we don't have enough mana, that's when you see these at 100%. So you can see like sometimes they'll get to 100% and not cast. That's because we didn't have enough mana for the comet with Archmage on it to auto cast out of our pool. And that'll kind of only happen when you're pumping. And if we can do it right now at the beginning of endgame, it's literally only going to get better from here, right? So, if we can manage it at level 74 with this kind of gear, which we definitely can, the higher level we get, the bigger our mana pool gets, the more regen we get, the less and less kind of intense effect these auto-pulling comets are going to have on our mana, and the more kind of reasonable it's going to be to just continuously pump. But you can see, even right now, it's not very often that this gets stuck at 100%. And if it does get stuck at 100%, what happens is the very next skull to explode is going to be the one to set that 100% off. And as long as you have enough mana, it'll cast it right there, right? And so, you can kind of see based on the gameplay footage how much that is happening. It's not a ton. It's mainly when, I'm kind of like maybe pumping just a little too much or chaining a bunch of stuff together. But I hope this is kind of like, giving you a better idea of how the gameplay feels. We're constantly, building up our fusillades, rolling into the fight with our max stack here. As soon as we see something, we flame wall, let it delete, and follow that up with frost bolts to start our freezing. Use our wall to auto detonate on stuff for huge damage. Use it as utility as we need to protect. When we see stuff in execute range, we step it to get our shocked ground, put that extra increased lightning, 25 or whatever percent extra lightning or extra damage in general on anything that's in that shocked round. And then beyond that, when we have a good spot, we can throw our sigil down, pump from our sigil, get that almost double DPS increase when we get to 4 stacks. You can see I'm instantly at, not instantly, but like literally like 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm at 4 stacks on the sigil, and that just absolutely pumps. So like the main time you want to do the sigil thing is here. Like if you see a big elite, that's like a perfect time to have your Ember stacked, throw down the Sigil, and really start to pump out of it, right? There's if you flame all too quick, sometimes it won't fully do the weapon swap, which is what happened there. But it only happens like rarely, and it's only if I just like do it slightly too fast. But yeah, you can kind of see like as you're casting of the Sigil, you're starting to get crazy power scaling, and you can kind of like one tap combo. Once you get that built up, your next kind of array of spells, especially with a big frost wall, is gonna kind of just like global whatever that yellow is. Like we've been taking out the rares, the yellow mobs, like pretty dang quickly, and it's just been I don't have a ton of context other than the Sork build I've been playing because these are my first builds in endgame, but like to me they've been feeling just like really strong, really powerful compared to like the other classes I've been testing, messing around with. And I'm just like a boring caster. I'm just a mage wizard, so it's kind of just my thing. So this is a good example. You want to grab, like if you see an Omen Scepter like this, you want to grab this baby and bring it back with you, and you want to craft it. So you want to use an Orb of Transmutation to bring it from normal to rare, and we're praying for a spirit increase here. So we can see my old scepter is level 11 malice. If we can get a good spirit roll on this, that's a level 16 malice. That's 5 levels up on the critical weakness debuff we're getting. So I want this, right? I've been trying to craft a new scepter since I crafted this one. Even though this one's goated, basically like this is the main way I've been kind of spending these orbs, and I do this with a decent amount of different stuff, but you get so many of these that you can kind of do this with most of the stuff you want, right? So we throw this on here. That's crap. Like we don't need that for this build at all. So I would salvage this. I would just disenchant it or sell it or whatever you want to do, right? And move on. But basically what you're doing is you're looking for a spirit roll there. And let's say that hit spirit, or you looted a blue one where you identified it and it showed spirit for the first roll. Then if it was looking good like that, you throw one of these on there. And if that's looking good, especially if it's a second spirit roll like I got on this, that's when you use the Regal Orb, jump it up to rare. If that third one's good, then you throw a couple Exalteds on it, throw the quality with the Arcanist Etchers, and you are in business with a crap ton of extra spirit. So I hope that kind of, makes sense as far as how you're wanting to like work the spirit angle on the scepter. So I don't know if I'm gonna like keep going through this whole thing because I'll probably come back to it and show you guys the rest of the build, but hopefully this kind of gives you a good understanding of how the build's kind of feeling. I would say this mana debuff here on this guy is like one of the most annoying ones. You just want to kind of keep him zoned with Frostfall. It's like the best way to deal with it. It's just, especially if the mob is fast and they're like up on you, kind of annoying to deal with that one because of how kind of mana heavy our build is anyways. But in general, we're kind of saucing a lot of the just regular yellow elites. And for boss fights, the main thing I die to is like the big like one-shot mechanics. So as long as you're dodging like the big one-shot mechanics, boss fights are pretty easy. We have enough damage to just kind of really pump to where, I've had a pretty dang easy time with boss fights on this guy pretty much all the way up leveling. And beyond that, yeah, you kind of got a good idea of how the mobbing looks right there. So I hope that's kind of enough to at least get you started, figuring out the combat for yourself and having a good time with it. All right, so for our last little section here, we're just going to go through the gems and the skill tree just like in more detail. I'm going to show you exactly what I have slotted into each thing and why. And I'll try to do this a bit quicker because we already talked a lot about how all the gems are working and their synergy together and stuff in the how it works section. So I mentioned it earlier, Volatile Dead is just coming from my wand, not necessary. I think of the wand choices, this might be the best one besides maybe the Mana Sypha one if you're mana dry. But because it's giving us a fireball, so it plays into all of our elemental damage, right? It's kind of boosted by everything we're doing. But I barely end up ever casting this. I do have it on my bar, but I don't do much with it. I have these in here kind of as placeholders. These are decent gems for it if you want to, actually cast it. But this is kind of, pretend that's not necessary or not really there. The base build, so these three are from our weapons, right? We have the Malice on the Scepter we've been talking about, and then we have the Sigil of Power on the staff weapon swap we've been talking about, and everything else is set to auto cast with our wand, so we just auto swap back. And then our kind of 5 core spells we've been talking about this whole time that we're casting are our 2 fire spells, our 2 frost spells, and lightning orb, right? And so if we look at, and then coming down here, we have all of our cast on minion stuff, and you want to think of the build like from here up. Think of it like the kind of first version of the build, the way it's kind of been working this whole time, is with this setup. Once you're scaling to a level of power and spirit where you can make it work, you want to find some decent unset rings, and you want to slot in a second cast on minion death with Comet, and then you want to slot in a third cast on minion death with Comet, and eventually you want to have these qualitied up and these qualitied up as well. And so basically what this is going to do is let this cast on minion effect that's already happening and calling down Firestorm with it, that's boosted like this, we're going to basically get 2 more of those like free comets coming down, and they're proccing from the same type of energy that's coming from our Raging Spirits exploding everywhere, right? So the only real weapon spell that we need to slot gems into is Sigil of Power. There we want to run Unbreakable, Energy Barrier, and Wind Wave. And this is the defensive setup that makes it feel really strong, where as you're casting out of it, you get this increased stun threshold. If you do get stunned, which will happen, you're going to get instant energy generation, that's energy barrier generation that's uninterrupted by damage for 2 seconds, which is really strong. And you're going to auto knock everything back with this wind wave effect proccing as well. So in Sigil, you know, you're basically, if you get stunned, you're harder to stun, but if you do get stunned, which will happen, you get this extra defensives like kicking through automatically. So now coming down to all of our spells that we're actually casting, these 5 right here, starting with Ember Fusillade, we are running Arcane Tempo for the extra cast speed, which is right now, this tooltip is bugged, but I'm at like 0.17 cast speed, I think, on Ember Fusillade with our skill tree setup. It's just... it's going fast. It's going real fast. And then we're not focused on crit at all in this build. So we're getting a big damage increase from Controlled Destruction. The only thing that's giving us crit is the Malice, but this Controlled Destruction is going to give us more of a DPS increase than any sort of extra critting we're getting off of that from our Fusillade. But we can see base crit chance on the Fusillade, not very high here. I don't know why it's not showing, but I think we're at like 7% or so critical strike chance. Oh, it's not showing because I have this slotted in. So if I pull this, yeah, our critical, or we're leveling up a little bit, so we're closer to like 10%. But you know, basically, this is we can see kind of what this does to the DPS. And this could be one. I was running this earlier actually. This could be one you could swap out if you want. I might end up experimenting, pulling this guy out. But basically, these 2 on Ember Fusillade, Controlled Destruction with Elemental Focus, because we're getting so many elemental ailments everywhere else, and because we're not really relying on crit, these 2 have felt like a really strong, consistent DPS increase, and especially early when your crit's really low. This one's really strong. We may end up eventually pulling these out if we want to try to get, especially when we get Unbound Avatar, we might want our Fusillade to be contributing to our ailments. But in general, if you're just casting Fusillade, you're not getting... like, it doesn't count towards cast on Ignite. It doesn't count toward cast on Shock with Archmage on it. So you're really not getting any ailments out of your Fusillade anyways. Your Ignites are coming guaranteed from your Burning Skulls, which are everywhere. So you literally don't even have to worry about igniting beyond that. But then your Flame Wall automatically instantly ignites. So you're getting, you know, you're basically having everything ignited. Your Firestorm's actually consuming those ignites to put out much bigger bolts. So because everything's on fire, your Firestorm, every time it procs, which is basically with this setup, it's raining down on you constantly. You're going to constantly be getting these mega Firestorm bolts coming through from eating those ignites on the way down. So basically, because of that reason, I haven't needed Elemental Ailment on Elemental Focus. We've been basically running with these 2, and if you can see if we throw them in together, it's like a massive DPS increase, right? Like from under 5,000 and then throwing them both back in up to almost 7,000. So significant damage increase basically because we're trading away our small crit % chance on it, and we're trading away elemental ailments on it, both of which we're getting very little value out of anyways, right? So that's kind of my logic there. And then we have this fast forward one on it, which you can slot in earlier if you want them to shoot faster. This is basically going to bring this, oh, here's my cast time, 0.19. I forgot it didn't show here and it shows here. That's my bad. So our cast time here is 0.19. You can see we can basically, in 1 second, we can get full Fusillades because the odds that one of these there's a 30% chance that these will cast 3 instead of 1. So very reliably in under a second, we can fully stack our Fusillades at this point. And if we look at what this does, check out this hover duration we saw on this gem. The base is 1.3. If we throw this in here, it's now 0.91. And so you can get basically a 4 second or 0.4 second speed reduction on this hover duration. Just to like show you here, here's without it. And here's with it. It's like a pretty significant difference, right? So That helps a lot to really lean into the pump of the fusillade. And remember, every fusillade that's going out, every single ember is spawning a Raging Spirit Skull. Every single Raging Spirit Skull is auto-exploding in 5 seconds after it ignite and fire exposes everything. And then every single one of those is feeding into all 4 or all 3 of our cast on minion death gems, right? And so just a crazy amount of value of, you know, continuing to pump Fusillade. Coming down to Flame Wall, this is a newer one that I tried not too long ago that feels fantastic with the way we're using Flame Wall. So I actually recommend, I have these ordered, by the way, in like the kind of prio I think they should exist in. So this is like, if you were leveling, this is literally the order I would kind of socket them in, like what I think the kind of like prio is on how it's benefiting the spell. And this is in general kind of the order I leveled with them as well. I was testing a bunch of stuff, but you know, this is basically what I think is like the min-maxed ordering of the gems from left to right, right? So on Flame Wall, I recommend dropping in mobility as soon as you can. And that's just going to make this slowdown effect like way more reasonable. And because we're casting Fusillade on the move like this, we're very often throwing a Flame Wall in right when we're getting up to stuff, and that's just going to make this kind of slowdown effect here much less aggressive, and it's going to make you feel much more mobile, much more kind of free. Look how much I slow down there now. If I don't have that in, you know, I'm kind of auto-casting, then I Flame Wall, I'm kind of like stuck for a sec, whereas as soon as you put this in here, it kind of gives you that freedom, and especially if you had move speed, right? I traded away my move speed boots finally. It's really hard for me to play without move speed, but I finally gave them up for these giant upgraded boots I found. But you know, in general, especially if you have move speed, this animation cancel on Fusillade is going to feel better, but then also this speed reduction on the Flame Wall is going to feel even better. And so that's kind of a new one with Flame Wall that I've been running in there, but I do think it's like maybe the best one we have for it actually. So beyond that, we want to do persistence, which is going to make the wall last longer. And then we can basically, this one's kind of up for grabs. Whatever you want to like try to throw in here, this is just going to make our ignite do more damage. So it's not going to do anything crazy. And so, you know, this slot's kind of up for grabs because we're not getting, you know, a huge amount of our damage from our Flame Wall Ignite. It's actually a very small percentage of our damage coming from our Flame Wall Ignite. So this is not super important. And if you don't want the duration effect, you can pull this out and you can try something else there, right? You know, this is actually maybe a good look for something like Fire Mastery if you're not running that somewhere. You know, there's a couple, plenty of different options you could kind of put in that last Flame Wall slot, and that'll probably change in the end. We'll have to end up seeing. Or we might just leave it in if we have the extra slot, right? If we get it fully upgraded, we'll have to see. There's not a ton of support gem options for Flame Wall right now. And if we look at the Flame Wall quality, this is going to increase the magnitude of our Ignite. So basically, because I qualityed this up, I was like, let's just run Intense Agony, try to boost that Ignite a little more. Why not? We have the extra slot for the support gem, right? All right, so coming down to Frostbolt, we have the Scatter Shot, Glaciation, and Wild Shard. So our Frostbolt is a utility spell. We're not really going for damage on it at all. We're trying to create a stupid amount of frozen ground to freeze everything around us. And if we look, when we're casting through our Flame Walls, which is all the time, every single one of these Frostbolt is going to have the added big, juicy, extra Flame Wall damage on it. And so it ends up synergizing really well with the Flame Wall. And you really want to think of it, you know, more as the utility spell, and we have it gemmed up that way. We have it shooting 3 all the time. We can see sometimes that shoots 5 from the extra projectiles. There's 5, there's 5, there's 3, there's 3. There's a Wild Shard. So you have 20% of the, or like around 30% of the time, you're getting 2 extra projectiles from these nodes here in our skill tree, these additional spell projectiles and psychic fragmentation. And then 20% of the time beyond that, you're also going to get 8 additional that shoot out in a circle from Wild Shards. And that's going to look like this crazy, you know, it's also very like aesthetic as well. Like I just really like when Wild Shards procs on Frostbolt, especially if it's through a flame wall like that. It's just very, you know, sort of visually pleasing. And, you know, the way that's sort of combining with the stuff we were talking about and doing with our Frost Wall, you know, it just ends up feeling pretty dang good here. So coming into our Frost Wall, we are going to be running Spell Cascade, Magnified Effect, and Font of Mana. We talked about these in the How It Works section because they're all kind of really important to how Frost Wall works. Spell Cascade is going to make 3 walls appear instead of 1. So we can see there's 3 lines here. The magnified effect is going to make all those pillars bigger, and then the font of mana is going to put this blue glow under us and give us an extra 40% mana regen as long as we're nearby those pillars. And so this setup on Frostwall lets us use it really well for utility, for the blocking of stuff, for the mana regen, but also because we're spawning so many wall chunks, and because they have this increased area of effect, that's going to increase the area of effect of each of these pillars exploding. So we have, you know, basically it's around like 5 pillars per line. So like every cast, if there's not stuff in the way, is like 15 pillars of ice. Those all have an increased area of effect when they explode. And so when we're fighting rare mobs and stuff and bosses, if we're casting Frostwall right on top of them like that, they're going to instantly detonate this whole central area. So you're going to literally get like, you know, 8 or so of these pillars to proc and do damage on a mob that's right in the middle of this Frostwall cascade. And so to me, this is like such a cool, fun feeling setup on Frostwall with, you know, kind of this specific gem setup we're running. And then finally coming down to the sort of final main spell we're casting here, Lightning Warp. And this is our Execute combined with our Shocked Ground, right? So to complement that, we are running Unleash. So what this does, you see this number 2 on the tooltip here. This basically builds charges, and they charge really fast. And when you use the spell, it will echo for extra casts of it from these charges. So like I have 2 right now. If I cast Flame Warp, it would cast again from the Unleash, and I'd have 1 charge left. If I use it right after that, it would cast again and use the second charge and trigger Unleash and Lightning Warp again. So we can basically, every time we Lightning Warp with Unleash, basically, because of how fast these recharge, because it's based on, the seals are based on cast time, and this has a very fast cast time. It's basically constantly up, so almost every Lightning Warp we're doing is doing a double tap of lightning damage, right? It's hitting, and then it's hitting for this echo that's 50% less damage, but still, you know, a very decent chunk. So then coming over to the next one, Shock Siphon, this is basically more of a supportive gem to help us just recover energy shield as we're bamfing around executing stuff. So a lot of times if you execute stuff, that's not going to count as a shock because they're just dead. You didn't shock them, you just deleted them, you executed them. But everything around them will get shocked. So basically anything you shock with this echo, the reverberation of the actual proc of Lightning Warp, will give you this energy shield regen. I don't think this is going to work off of, oh yeah, this will. So also it should work if you kill anything in your shocked ground resulting from one of your Lightning Warps, it should also proc this. So I found really good synergy with Shock Siphon and Lightning Warp. And then finally we're running Elemental Discharge. And this is like, you know, kind of the third one you want to put in here to really make it pump. Like this is going to make a significant difference in the damage, because what this does, it's going to make your, anytime you Lightning Warp and that AoE hits everything around it, anything that's frozen, ignited, or shocked already, it's going to eat those ailments to proc this elemental discharge damage effect. This is like a spell hit of its own that happens automatically when the spell it's socketed into, so Lightning Warp in our case, consumes any elemental ailment. So anytime Lightning Warp hits an ignited target, a frozen target, or a shock target, this elemental discharge will proc. And we can see here, there is basically a damage percentage dealt based on our intelligence. And so the more intelligence we have, the more damage it's going to do, and the type of damage is going to depend on basically which one of the ailments it consumes, right? And so, you know, obviously if it consumes freeze, it's dealing cold damage, ignite doing fire damage, shock doing lightning damage. And when I finally socketed this into Lightning Warp after getting the 3rd slot, it really makes it pump. And you know, I think this is like really high value here, and like kind of one of the best feeling ones to really ramp. That combined with Unleash, like working together, really ramps the feeling of Lightning Warp being able to actually like not only execute who you're warping to, but kind of huge burst to everything around that area, which it's a big circle, right? It's a pretty big area. All right, now coming down to our final big spirit stack here. Remember, we can kind of think of it in terms of these 4 being the main ones, and then as we're coming into endgame and getting more spirit and our 2 unset rings, we can look to socket in our second 2 cast on minion deaths to give us a total of 3. But kind of think of these as, you know, as you're coming into endgame and you're kind of coming up on that spirit, as much spirit as you need right now to run this setup, because the one gem we have is Clarity, which really helps with Archmage. The one like support gem that consumes spirit, we are at a total of 380 spirit consumed right now. So We have 387 total. We have 7 left. So currently our active spirit gems are using 380. So if you want to run this setup, your target kind of for spirit to have all these online at once is 380. And from there, you kind of should be good. We're not expecting to, unless we change something else up significantly, we're not really looking to get more spirit beyond here. If you are able to, just get more spirit, because you get a gear piece with it or whatever, you can start socketing in the couple more. There's not a ton of options here, but there's a few more support gems that will, cost spirit and give you stuff, but they're health related. So because we're doing the barrier evasion thing, we don't need them nearly as much, but it's like things like herbalism is a good one for the flasks. The vitality is the percentage health one. And then there's the cannibalism that gives you the health recovery when you get a kill. So I think if I had to rank those, I'd probably put vitality first, and then maybe herbalism first, then vitality second, then cannibalism third. Kind of the prio. I would socket those in as you get more spirit, but all those are pretty unnecessary. The main one you're going to want as a support gem that consumes spirit is the clarity. And so just keep in mind 380 is kind of the target number that's going to get you to this 6 spirit gem setup. The 4 main ones being Raging Spirits, Cast on Minion Death, Cast on Freeze, and Archmage, and the last 2 being 2 extra Cast on Minion Death. So if we look at these here, we talked about the Raging Spirit ones in the how it works because it's so integral to how this build works, but the 2 that really make it go are Infernal Legion and Minion Instability. These are going to make your minions lose all of their max health over 5 seconds. As they cook down like that, they are going to ignite everything around them based on their max health. When they do finally explode in 5 seconds, when they do finally die in 5 seconds from minion instability, they are now going to explode for fire damage to everything around them. And I think another good gem to socket in here in maybe our 4th or 5th slot is the Meat Shield, the one that takes damage away from your minions' attacks, but it scales their health. And the reason we want to do that is because we're not getting barely any damage out of these actually attacking. All of our damage is coming from them burning their health and igniting everything. So if we get both of these gems, their ignite damage is based off of max health. So this explosion damage is based off of max health. This ignite damage is based off of max health. So if we scale our Raging Spirit's health with a max life support gem such as Meat Shield, it should scale the damage of these 2 very well. And I was running that at first until I finally got to fire exposure, and this is such a good setup with Ember's Raging Spirits because this is going to basically guarantee that literally everything around you is fire exposed all the time, because anything within range of any of your skulls, which are literally everywhere, is going to be igniting 100% of the time, which is guaranteed to inflict fire exposure. Okay, so coming to like the juiciest gem in our kind of repertoire, like the real big one that makes the whole thing pump, Cast on Minion Death. And so this is one I have boosted with additional quality because of how important the energy becomes. But even right when you first are able to use this, you just have Raging Spirits and Cast on Minion Death first when you're at, your first 90 spirit. This gem with these first 2 without any extra or anything in the skill tree feels good with this build, right? But as we're able to do this and expand it out, it's going to feel even better. So as we build into quality and get the extra 20% energy, and as we get impetus, which gives it 40% energy outright, combined with energy retention that makes it 35% of the time when it triggers, it will refund half its energy cost. We stack that with Energize, which makes it so 25% of the time they refund half their energy costs. Those can proc at the same time, which will put you, instantly back up to another full cast, basically. And then beyond that, we have the increased energy from Impetus. We also have the increased 3 increased energy nodes here. We have the increased energy from Soul Springs Eternal here, and we're going to be getting this increased energy over here as well. And finally into dynamicism, which is going to give them 15% more, and then it's going to make us do 40% damage increase if we've triggered a skill recently, which is literally all the time. So I'm super excited to finally make my way over here and get into dynamicism. We had to actually go this chunk of nodes first because stuff was getting a little spicy defensively. And so now that we're kind of beefed up with gear, and these 2, I'm not going to lie, these 2 together actually go really far for your defensives if you're building energy shield evasion, because you can see this is recovery rate, right? So there's actually a big difference between, see how this says energy shield recovery rate? Literally everything else you mouse over is going to say energy shield recharge rate. Energy shield recharge, energy shield recharge, energy shield recharge, faster start of energy shield recharge. Nothing else says recovery. And what I think is that recovery is sort of like the base value. And the only other place you can find that nearby is this node here. And I got this on my sorceress, and this makes a significant difference in how fast your energy shield recharges, because I think recovery rate, you see the difference, recharge rate, recovery rate, recharge rate, recovery rate. So recharge rate is basically affects how quickly energy shield is recovered by recharge once it's recharging. This basically increases that base recovery rate overall. So I think once you invest into here, any extra percentage increase you have to recharge rate is actually going to boost this as well. Like Soul Bloom is kind of on the bottom before these extra percentages get, thrown on top. So it's going to give you even more value of the recharge speed. That same thing is happening down here with Shimmering, right? So even if you are struggling at all, going like 1, 2, 3 and just getting Shimmering without these other 4, you'll find as soon as you're into the evasion setup with the evasion energy shield gear, this by itself is going to make a big difference in kind of how fast your energy shield is recharging. Okay, so we have our turbo cast on minion death, and then basically, like we talked about, as you scale into endgame and you get the extra spirit for it, 2 unset rings combined with 2 more cast on minion deaths. As you get those, and as you get the extra spirit for them, and that's gonna, and we're not, because we're going all in on this one with our gems and support and with Firestorm. The spells in here, Combat and Firestorm, these were I was trying a bunch of stuff when I figured out the cast on minion synergy with my sorceress, and I was like, dude, I wonder what are the biggest spells I can kind of auto cast out of here. And I was trying a bunch of different stuff. I tried just Comet for a while, but this setup, Comet with Firestorm with this build, just feels so good because it gives us a literal constant Firestorm now, or just always embers raining down our screen, hitting kind of everything around us. Anytime anything's ignited, it's going to amp these into these super bolts, eat the ignite, and just absolutely pump. And so we basically always have Firestorms coming out from this, and then the Comet is crashing in for a huge, massive damage AoE freeze effect as well. And so, this is the one that's really juiced, and then we're eventually going to support that with 2 more kind of lesser versions. Eventually, you'd want to quality these up as well, and keep them leveled and such. But these are basically extensions of your cast on minion death idea, just kind of replicating it a second time and then a third time here as soon as you get the rings and the spirit available to do that. So that's cast on minion death, and coming down to kind of our final 2 here. We have our other cast on spell, cast on freeze. We're running just cold snap here. We talked about the synergy of cold snap with cast on freeze. It's such a low cast time, being the only gem in here, that this feels so fast, especially as you're, wild shard frost bolting and then frostwalling. Like, you just have so much kind of freeze going out that your cast on freeze is building very quickly. And this cast time is so short, like these energy gems, the energy required to proc them and get them to auto cast is based on the cast time of what you have socketed in. So because this is 0.5, such a slow cast time, this thing procs very often if you're freezing a lot. And like we talked about, it will literally hold its charge, and it won't just waste it like all the other spells will, where it just comes out and hits nothing. Because it's like a targeted spell that only works on freeze targets, it has to consume a freeze. It'll literally wait to cast it until there's a frozen target around. And if there's no frozen target, it'll detonate a wall chunk if that's around. If none of that's around, it literally won't cast. It'll just sit at 100%. So I found that this one just has really high value with just cold snap in there. You might be tempted to throw in a Comet, but the Comet's basically going to slow it down a lot. It's going to add 2 seconds of extra cast time. And when the Comet comes out with nothing around, it's going to waste the cold snap. The cold snap's just going to go away. So having this just cold snap has felt really, really good. And then what we can do is throw the cold mastery in here, and this is going to give +1 cold not only to the cast on freeze, but also to the cold snap. So have been a really big fan of this cast on freeze setup as well. And you basically want to try to bring this one online after you have your Raging Spirits and cast on minion death online. So kind of the prio here, I have them ordered in prio of how you want to build them leveling up. So you want to do, for your first 30 spirit, you want to get your Raging Spirits online. For your next 60, you want to pull in your first cast on minion death. For your next 60, you want to boot cast on freeze. And then kind of the final step is the next big 100. And having a good scepter is really going to help, with that kind of final jump up to Archmage. And we talked about this a lot. This is going to give increased extra damage as lightning on top of what you already have DPS wise, based on your max mana. And so right now it's giving 6% extra as a damage as lightning per 100 max mana. And I was calculating it based off 5, but let's just say we have 1,000 max mana. That's literally 60% extra damage as lightning, right? And so if we consider almost having 1,300, we're at like, another 12 on 60 is 72. Another like almost 6 would be, let's call it like 76. We're at like 76% gain extra damage as lightning, and we can see that reflected on all of our spells. If we pull up the details, we have a fatty amount of lightning damage, and we can see on any of them the DPS numbers. Like, take a look at all these DPS numbers here. If I drop off Archmage, these are going to tank. So 6,880, 2,300, almost 1,000, a little over 600 and 1,420. If I toggle this off, it's a massive kind of DPS drop off all these things because we're losing so much gain extra damage as lightning, and you see that reflected in this lightning damage number on all of them, right? And as soon as we turn it back on, this lightning number just jumps way up and just gives us a huge extra kind of chunk of lightning damage under thing. And this build is actually better at handling the Archmage than the Sorceress build was, surprisingly, because the Sorceress build, the Elemental Storm we're building around, is actually pulling so much extra mana from Archmage that my mana regen on this guy, especially with the font in Frostwall, and I have font in Solar Orb on the other build too, but it just is like a little more reliable in the Frostwall, I feel like, as far as like always being around you. The mana regen has just felt like really good. And the one thing with Archmage that's going to make it feel a lot better is having Font of Mana in something. Here we have it in the wall, combined with Clarity here. And Clarity is it's an extra 10 spirit, but, having it socketed in with Archmage, we also have Lightning Mastery just for the extra spell rank. But having this socketed in is going to, just give you a big chunk of that extra mana regen you need to make it work. And something we mentioned earlier with Archmage is as soon as you get Archmage, you really want to get these skill points right here. This is very necessary to making Archmage feel good. It's going to make a huge difference. And so I highly recommend when you're looking to pull Archmage online, even if you have to like pull a couple of points out of wherever you're progressing, just throwing these in, quickly and then refilling wherever you were at, it's just going to make Archmage feel quite a bit better. And so because like Archmage is already feeling good right now. So it's basically by the time we're in like end game, we're not even going to really have to worry about our mana, I don't think, because if it's feeling good already, like it's only going to go up from here. All right, so that was a detailed look at the full gem setup. Now let's take a detailed look at the full skill tree setup. And I talked about the logic behind this earlier. I was doing a Sorceress build that looked very similar to this. I was just starting on the Sorceress side, but all of this stuff in the Monk tree here, all of this stuff in the Sorceress tree here, and this huge elemental cluster here does a massive amount for this build. And so the value we're getting out of the start of these two trees is kind of insane. And if we look at, what we're getting here, gain extra damage as cold with extra freeze, good energy shield, recharge allowed along with stun threshold, increase evasion energy shield, increase cast speed mana regen. This is the only one we don't really need, but we're still proccing this every 8 seconds because of how much we're putting out. So we're always getting an extra 36% damage from this, even though we're not building into crit. We also have another 5% here from Essence of the Storm, chance to shock. We have energy shield recharge rate here and faster start. We have better energy shield here with more stun threshold. We have max mana increased, base mana and max mana. We have more max energy shield int. We have mana regen. We have cast speed. We have spell damage. We have elemental damage. We have more elemental damage, and we have shock, freeze, and ignite build up. And then, when we come up here, I'll go through the order in a sec, but I'm just kind of talking through these big nodes. We're basically going to have all three of these active all the time. And so this cluster here, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 10%. So 70% on the normals, and then another 90% on these ones, which are going to be proccing all the time because of intentionally because of the spell rotation we're using, right? These are basically always going to be active. So we're looking at, from this cluster right here, 160% increased elemental damage, right? And then we're kind of building into the extra projectile speed. We got the mana regen with Archmage we talked about, and the extra defenses we recently had to get here. And then we're pathing up and really prioritizing the energy nodes. So we're coming up, getting this cast speed mana regen, socketing in a gem. All my gems have been kind of bad. I finally got a good gem, and it's like perfect for this build. So something like this, anything related to like spell damage, area of effect, anything like with trigger or meta or anything like that, anything that sounds good, socket it in here. And then from here, we're going to be going here. We'll get to the order in a sec, but we're going to be making our way down here and finally coming to this last dynamism node. So now let's go through kind of the pathing, because the pathing is relevant. So I recommend to start off not going with Soul Springs Eternal, because you're not going to have your cast on minion death leveling, right? When you ascend into Invoker, you are not going to have cast on minion death yet. And so what you want to do is go I Am the Blizzard first. And then you want to go, like when you're in Act 2, when you unlock it, and then you want to go, I Am the Thunder second. Or, you know, it's really kind of preference here, which one you're feeling. But this is basically just going to give you the gain extra damage on both of these. You're going to get big DPS increase here. So the whole time leveling, I was running both of these. I was running I Am the Blizzard and I was running I Am the Thunder. Only very recently, I pulled, basically, once I got, what you want to do is once you're able to get here, once you can kind of unlock this full cluster here, that's going to be the time that you have enough stuff online to where this is going to be worth it. So once you get there, pull these two out, put them into Soul Springs Eternal. Now you're really leaning into your energy stack with everything online, and that's kind of where we're at right now as we're recording this video. And, you know, looking into deeper endgame as we get our 5th and 6th ascendancy points, we're going to go here to Unbound Avatar. This is going to have absolutely insane synergy with the amount of elemental ailments we're putting out. And it's just going to basically give us a really big, you know, elemental damage buff combined with more elemental ailments coming out while this is up. And I haven't seen it yet, but I imagine it looks pretty cool when it procs, because we become unbound and I shall rage. So that's going to be 5 and 6, and I think that's really going to kind of jump to a new level once we're able to unlock that. And then from there, we're going to go 7, 8 this way back into I Am the Blizzard, because we don't need this magnitude of shield. We would rather take the elemental damage. So we're going to kind of do this loop around effect here. We go, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you get to this point in the game and unlock this cluster here, then pull I Am the Blizzard out of here and put it into Soul Springs Eternal. And then when you get deep enough into endgame to do Ascendancy 5 and 6, you're going to go here into Unbound Avatar. And then from there, you're going to go 7, 8 into I Am the Blizzard. And so we're going to have a really powerful elemental damage, gain on damage, energy, you know, crazy elemental boost avatar thing going from our Ascendancy. And this was the pathing that sort of inspired me to roll a monk and play basically the same build, or a very, it's quite a bit different. There's some pretty distinct differences, but it's similar in a lot of ways. But just because of how juicy this chunk looks for this exact setup. So that's kind of the, you know, the idea behind the Ascendancy. And now coming into the actual skill progression here, we're going to make our way up this side. We're not doing any attacking because we're full spellcaster, so we're just going to path over to this crit, even though we don't really need it. We're going to go Flow Like Water. We're going to go up here into Flow Like Water skill speed. Then we're going to go into Essence of the Storm here for the extra damage. Then we're going to grab this crit one for the extra damage there. Then we are going to make our way through Mindful Awareness here. We're going to go get Essence of the Mountain. We're going to wait to get Mystic Stance until we need it. So at this point in the game, you're not going to need this node. You're not going to, you know, in general, you're not going to be getting stunned and pressured enough for this to make a big difference. So you're going to kind of wait to get that until we find our way over here. And we're going to bring all this energy stuff online right when we get over here. And that's going to be right around the level where we start to really need it. Stuff's getting kind of like harder, you know, going into Cruel. And so, you know, get these 4, leave this one empty for now, path up here. And for these nodes, you're going to basically get what you need at the time. So a lot of mine are decks because of how heavy my gear is. We need a lot of decks out of these attribute nodes in order to run this split gearing, right? In order to run these pieces that require evasion, shield, and energy, we need both dex and int. But in general, starting out, you're going to want most of these to be intelligence. Like you're going to be, especially doing what I recommend, like building kind of full energy barrier up till you get to like this point in the game and start transitioning to evasion barrier here. You're going to want most of these to be int, and then you can always just adjust them based on what you need, right? So kind of starting with int, make your way up here. From here, we're going to fill this entire thing out. So literally, as soon as you kind of get these extra damages and this stuff, you come up here and we're just going to get all this. So as fast as you can, fill this whole thing out. Huge amount of extra damage coming in here. From here, we're going to come up to here and we're going to get these extra chance to cast projectiles. So once we get Psychic Fragmentation and this cluster online, you're going to really start to feel the blasting. And then from there, we're going to continue to scale that with more Sork like kind of spell casting stuff. So we come over here to the left, we're gonna get this really nice mana regen, extra barrier here, and then we're going to come over and get a bunch of good barrier stuff here. So we're going to go energy shield delay, and then we're going to go rapid recharge and mana blessing. And you can, it literally doesn't matter if you go from the bottom or the top here, but you're going to have to get one of these recharge nodes to get dampening shield. And this is just big energy shield increase with more stun threshold. When you, and then you want to come down to pure energy because it's going to connect you over here, but this is a crazy valuable one too with just big max energy shield and int. So basically, once you grab this stuff, as soon as you feel like you need more defensives, you want to get these two because Mystic Stance is going to stack really well with Rapid Recharge and these extra nodes you're getting. So this is basically going to bring these two things stacked, like this node, and these three nodes are going to bring your energy shield recharge to 100%. And that means when you get hit, it's going to take 2 seconds to start recharging instead of 4 seconds. So you literally are having the amount of time required for the charge to start. And that's basically, we're getting all that through this little node cluster here. And you're going to really feel that. Like that has kind of huge value. And especially now that we're moving into the evasion thing, if we're getting hit, as long as we can dodge stuff for 2 seconds, we're going to start regenning our barrier. And we're going to be getting some increased speed on that charge as well, right? So now coming down after pure energy, we want to make our way over through cast speed first. And then we want to basically scoop these two mana regen nodes when we need them. So, and you don't want to get this one until, like I have this in here as a filler. Because like, as you're pathing here, like if I don't need these attributes, instead of putting that point here, I would rather put it over here in extra mana regen. Then when I level again, maybe I pull this out of here and go 1-2, so I'm actually getting something of value. And even this cold damage isn't that value. So what I'm actually going to do is I put this one here, so I'm getting extra mana regen for this whole level. I'll put another one here, so I'm getting extra mana regen for a whole nother level. Then when I hit the third level, I'll pull this one out, I'll pull this one out. Now I have 3 points, and I can actually pad the somewhere of value. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, get a huge node. Next level, I get another huge node. That's a way to sort of like realize the value of your points before you path. You want to kind of like put them, especially as you get deeper like this and levels are taking longer and every stat is more and more important to like your progress. You want to be investing your, if you don't need the attributes, you want to be investing your power into nodes that are actually working. And then when you have the number of nodes you need to path somewhere, you want to pull those extra nodes of power out, like your extra mana regens, like we're talking about here, and put them into the path to realize the value rather than kind of sitting at this empty pathing here. I don't need these attributes for anything. If I took this level instead of the mana regen, it's doing nothing. So it's like I have the choice of having something or having nothing for this level, and I'm going to get to this, these two either way in a level or two, right? So that's kind of my strategy for pathing a lot of time, is investing in nearby value that I need at that level right at that time, and then pulling those extra points as we kind of progress, and have enough to path to where we are realizing some real value again. So once we got those two, I would do the same thing going this way, right? Maybe wait 2 or 3 levels till we can get the gem socket, wait maybe 4 levels till we can get lucidity, and put those 3 or 4 levels into mana regen or whatever we're needing, like mana regen right now. So, I'd get this one, I'd get these 2 and maybe one of these. And then when I finally had those, I'd pull all 4 out and get to another big node of power, right? So I know we got a little sidetracked. I hope that kind of makes sense, but I guess like going back to the original point, you don't really need to get these mana regens until you need the mana. So you can kind of leave this empty at the start, and you really are after this one. So you can kind of go 1, 2, and this is the extra one, which I'll probably pull back out eventually, right? Like I was talking about, but you do really want the skill speed ones filled out. Coming over to raw power, big spell damage increase, more int, perfect. Big elemental damage coming in up into extra cold damage, which you would go cold or fire here. Both are a significant chunk of our pump. The main reason I'm going cold is for the comets. So this is just going to give our comets more burst, and we're going to get a huge chunk of our DPS from our auto comets, especially kind of the further we scale, right? And then we're getting this really good increased chance to freeze, ignite, and shock, along with the extra damage with it and more elemental damage here, right? So we're just kind of building into further elemental damage here. These nodes combined with these nodes really going to make the build pump as you're leveling your spell gems. So then from there, we are going to start our pathing up to our energy gem. So from there, we're going to go up this way. And again, just be distributing these depending on what attributes you need at the time. Whatever attributes you need to run your gem, to run your gear, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of distribute appropriately. We're going to get these quick 3 in cast speed and mana regen. Socket in, any kind of jewel that's looking good that synergizes well with the build here. This is like a really good looking one, but Any kind of spell related stuff. But if you can find one with anything related to meta energy or triggered spells, like this is the first one I found with something like a triggered spell effect on it. So, kind of anything that's looking good that might synergize with the build, throw it in here. And then coming down and getting our favorite kind of giant, juicy invocation caster, metacaster node here. And this is going to give almost 100% increased spell damage along with some mana back every time we invoke a spell. So this is going to help a decent bit with Archmage, because now every meteor that's coming out is not pulling 6% of our max mana. It's pulling, or is not pulling 5% of our max mana. It's pulling 2%, because we're getting 3% back from this. So once you get invocated efficiency, it's also going to really help with the kind of mana draw that's coming from those auto comets, right? And you're really going to want this before you try to run more than one cast and minion death gem, probably, right? And that's kind of around when you're getting this, is around the time when you're having enough kind of spirit to run these final two anyways. So those are kind of coming online around the same time regardless. And then we get 24% increase energy to all our meta skills here coming into this really good energized node. And this is going to give our triggered skills 25% chance to refund half the energy. We have another chance for that to happen on our main cast and minion death gem from Impetus. Or sorry, Impetus is giving us the increased energy regen. It's from energy retention. So the same kind of idea where a spell triggering can refund half its energy cost can also proc 35% of the time off this. So in a situation where these can both proc together, you'll instantly go back to 100 and get an instant another proc of the big cast of minion death with another comet and another refreshed firestorm coming through. And only one firestorm can be active at once, but having this setup basically keeps firestorm active on you essentially like all the time. So from there, kind of looking at the final pathing here, this is around the time when you're going to be coming into endgame mapping and stuff's going to be getting a little trickier. So in that session we had in the live stream I was talking about earlier, and you can check the the VOD for that on my channel under the live section. That whole kind of thing, we made our way into this. And so we were starting with just continuing our damage path here, but I pulled these out to go into here, and it helps a ton, especially as we're scaling up our gear, right? And so these just have, we talked about how the recovery rate is different from the recharge rate. And so getting the recovery rate here is very useful along with the extra movement speed. And then we're just getting value of energy shield evasion into immaterial. And this one's really cool because it's going to make it so we get 50% increase evasion rating if this charge has started in the past 2 seconds, and we get another 30% while we have energy shield. So in the zone where our energy shield is starting to recharge, we have an 80% extra evasion, which goes a really long way actually. So this is like a kind of like when you're beginning your end game mapping, you want to look at filling this whole baby out. If you feel like you need more barrier stuff earlier, you can do 1, 2, 3 and just go to shimmering and get these 4 later. But this shimmering node is going to make a significant difference in how the barrier recovery feels. Okay, so from there, kind of our future pathing, what we're going to do from here is basically go over here into this, and we're going to get these 2 big frost nodes. We're going to get thin ice, which is going to give us just some extra freeze buildup along with big damage against frozen enemies. And we're going to get heavy frost, which is more freeze buildup combined with all of our hits on frozen targets, ignoring elemental resistances. So these 2 are going to do big for our damage actually. And especially the fact that these are playing into Comet very well, right? And Comet having that massive damage combined with freeze on the way down is really going to make help a lot with the Comet DPS. Then we're going to come down here, and basically depending on how our mana and survivability is, at some point we're going to get lucidity, but we're only going to sort of get it when we feel like we need more damage reduction, right? If we're struggling with dying and our mana is feeling good, that's the time to get lucidity. If our mana is not feeling good yet, or if we're not struggling with dying, we really don't need this yet. And so basically what it's going to be doing, it's going to be pulling mana, so it'll be 16% of the damage we take is going to come out of our mana pool before our life pool. So it's going to put more pressure on your mana pool, but it's going to give you like basically 16% damage reduction straight up. So very strong defensively, but going to put extra pressure on your mana pool. We're building so much max mana and regen that we should be able to kind of absorb this without feeling it much once we're a little deeper. So once we get these four, it's basically your call based on how stuff is feeling. If you have the extra mana and you want the extra survivability, go 3 here. If not, hold off on these till a bit later. But I think eventually we are probably going to want to go lucidity. So from there, we're going to pad down here, get this extra jewel socket here, then down to this cross section, and finally come into this last juicy node of energy skills. And this is just more increased energy, more spell damage, combined with more increased energy and 40% extra damage on everything if we've triggered a spell recently, which is literally all the time. And so once we get this online, that's going to be coming online, you know, along with Unbound Avatar, and finally into the extra coming from Iron the Blizzard. And so, you know, we're gonna I expect that we're gonna be feeling even more powerful with even more crazy auto casting happening coming into Dynamism. And I haven't looked, we're running kind of low on points here once we're here, but for the last few, and this is like what I'm probably going to be kind of changing and editing in the build guide. I think if we're looking for more mana regen, and especially with Archmage and with Lightning Warp, these shock nodes with extra regen and alternating current here are a good look. So we might end up building 4 here if we want more shock, more mana regen after this point. And we might also be looking at more energy shield evasion rate here up into Shadow Dancing. And this is going to give us increased evasion rating if we've been hit recently, combined with faster start of energy shield recharge if we've been stunned recently. And so because we're casters, not crazy stun threshold or building into it or anything, we get stunned a decent bit. And so, and I think that's based off max life. And so we have a decent bit of max life, but we're certainly not building max life. And so, you know, this is just going to really be another thing to help with our survivability, combined with, you know, all this just extra energy shield evasion that's going to help continue, you know, that kind of defensive stacking we're doing. So that's basically it with the skill tree. I hope that sort of makes sense. It's going to, you know, look like this kind of start into the elemental projectile stuff, into the Sork stuff, bring your, you know, barrier stuff online. When you get Archmage, scoop this mana cost reduction, make your way up here, get this juice with the gem slot, get your golden meta wizard energy stuff here. As soon as your stuff's looking sketchy in endgame mapping, start getting all these nodes here, and then eventually make your way down. Get these 2 big frost nodes, look at lucidity when you need it, hit this gem socket, all this juice into dynamism, and then potentially, you know, look here for some extra defensives, look here for some extra shock and mana, and, you know, some other nearby options we can look at for those final points in the end. So that's skill tree. Hope that makes sense. All right, coming into our gear here, just identified our unique Trofina Forge Maul. I haven't seen this one yet, but this is always getting critical hits against stunned enemies. This has nothing to do with the build. This is literally what we just got showing the gameplay in that map. Actually looks kind of sick though. Cool. So yeah, let's take a look at our gear, and I'm going to just start with some general stuff real quick. I've mentioned this a couple times, but if you're skipping to this section, I just want to make sure you're aware. I highly recommend building full energy barrier on the way up, because I do not think you have enough attributes to effectively build both while keeping all your intelligence skill gems maxed out as you level. So I recommend going full intelligence gear, which is just full barrier, and I think defensively that works better anyways, because I don't think evasion has that much value until you're able to stack it maybe past like 50%, where it's actually doing some reasonable amount of mitigation and giving your energy shield a reasonable amount of time to avoid damage to start recharging, right? But that's not really going to happen until your end game. You have all these extra attributes coming from your skill tree pathing. You have all these extra attributes coming from big pieces, you know, 30 on our gloves, 22 on our helm, etc., right? So, but you're not going to kind of get those extra attributes until you're closer and closer to end game. And so as you're making your way to that point, it's much easier and it's going to feel much better to just build full energy shield. And when you're coming up to like around level 60, you know, around, you know, maybe level 70, as you're kind of beating Cruel, coming into your mapping, that's the point you want to start looking for. I think my kind of, you know, best thing is like towards the end of Cruel, start hunting for energy shield evasion pieces that are like level 55 plus, you know, 50, 55 plus. And that's going to let you carry an initial starter set of energy evasion gear into your first mapping. And what that's going to let you do is knock out, you know, the first 5 tiers of maps like I just did in that stream. And that's going to give you the ability to get some new upgrades if you're keeping an eye out for them and if you're trying to craft stuff with orbs and stuff. So literally all 5 of these pieces, besides the belt, which I already had, I might have got the belt too. But I got all 4 of these pieces in that 8-hour stream I did, going through, tier 3 to tier 5 maps right at the start of mapping on this guy. So try to come in from the end of Cruel with a starter evasion energy shield set. If you have a couple big energy shield pieces, just keep those because they're still really good. And then, as you're kind of progressing into mapping, that's when you really want to start prioritizing the evasion energy shield gear. You're going to have enough attributes to rock it, and the evasion is going to do a big amount to let the energy shield you have recharge consistently in the middle of combat, because you're evading that damage that's coming at you, and damage is what stops the energy shield from recharging, right? The other thing is that these unset rings are not required until you have enough spirit to run these 2 extra cast on minion deaths. So don't worry about getting, you're not going to be getting these until around level 40, or yeah, it looks like 44 is the base level for unset rings when you'll start to kind of see them dropping. But you don't really need to socket these in or worry about getting good ones until you're able to get the final 120 energy to run these final 60 cast on minion deaths. These are kind of be the extra icing on the cake to fill these last 2 skill slots and mimic our big cast on minion death, just bringing down more comets from working off the same kind of energy loop and all the stuff we're building into. And the final kind of like big point here is we're going for a big spirit stack, like along with what we were just talking about. So we're wanting, I talked about this earlier, but we're always wanting to try to find a better Omen Scepter. So you want an Omen one for the extra free crit, because the other Scepter effects aren't really going to do much for you. And the big thing we need on here is spirit. So we're looking for a good base spirit roll. Grab any white Omen Scepter you find, any blue Omen Scepter you find, any yellow Omen Scepter you find. For the white ones, throw a blue orb to upgrade it. See if you get a spirit roll that's good on that first one. And I did this, if you go watch the gameplay section where I'm showing the spell rotation live, I literally show this on an Omen Scepter that dropped. You basically want to use an orb to try to get a first spirit roll. If you get something that looks decent there, even if it's not spirit, try an orb of augmentation to see if you can get a good second roll. If both those rolls are looking good, especially if they're both spirit, like what happened with this one when I was crafting it, that's the point where you want to drop a regal orb on there to turn it into rare, and then you want to try a couple more exalteds if that's looking good, to kind of fill out the stats on it. And then from there, you want to take, if you're happy with it, you want to take your Arcanist Etchers, put the 20% quality on there, and bring it all the way up to as much spirit as possible. So I'm constantly hunting for a new scepter. I've been rocking this one since level 42. It's been incredibly useful. Actually, my sorceress found this one and crafted it. And so my sorceress and this guy share this scepter because it's still so good. But I'm constantly on the hunt for a new scepter. That's like a really big part of the gearing in this build, is finding a big spirit scepter. The bigger one of these that you can find earlier, kind of the more quicker you're going to be able to lean into all this cast on stuff and Archmage and everything, right? And then to complement that, we're also looking for a solar amulet with a spirit roll, so we can get another like 45 spirit out of here, even with a min. This is the absolute minimum spirit you could get on the tier 1 spirit roll, but it has 15 base, right? So it's a max roll on the base, and then it's a min roll on the affix. But something just super average like this is all you're going to need for a necklace, and you want to try to get obviously other good rolls that are useful on here. And then finally looking for a good spirit roll on chest, and this is just a goated chest that I found mapping last night that really has helped me out with not just resistances but also stun threshold, and a big spirit roll, giving us essentially just as much as we need to run all of our meta gems, combined with 2 extra cast of minion deaths and even a vitality or a clarity here to support Archmage. And like we talked about, if you're able to get extra 380 is your target spirit to run everything, right? So you're going to need 380 total to do exactly what I'm doing here. 3 cast of minion deaths, Archmage, cast of freeze, and raging spirits. If you get extra beyond that, plus clarity. If you get extra beyond that, you want to start slocketing in those extra support gems that require spirit, right? So it's like you got Herbalism, which would probably be the first prior one, then Vitality would probably be the second prior one, then Cannibalism would probably be the third prior one. If you have a big enough spirit stack, just throw all 3 of them in because they can't hurt. And maybe as the early access gets deeper in, more spirit gems that are support will get released that might be useful, but that's literally all that kind of exists right now. So you can kind of fill out the rest of your spirit with those extra gems to help your health regen, because why not? Like, we're not relying on health to regen a ton, but if we get chunked down and where the stuff's through our barrier, definitely doesn't hurt. And the other kind of main general thing is we are rocking the Wand Scepter setup, but we're always going to be rocking a chiming staff in our offhand. And we talked about this and how it works section, but we're going to have this set up to auto swap to cast our sigil, and that's going to add a crazy amount of DPS, as well as giving us kind of a defensive zone to cast out of when we have a chance to stand and pump. With this item, it literally doesn't matter what stats are on it because you're going to be instantly swapping away from it. What you really need here is a scaled sigil of power level. So you want just continually as you level up, try to I need to upgrade this one. I think I could be at like a level 16 sigil of power now with a slightly higher chiming staff. I should have traded this for a white one already. I just haven't been thinking about it. So you want to constantly be thinking about just every new chiming staff you find that's a higher level sigil of power that you can equip, just throw that baby on in your offhand regardless of the stats, because all you're doing with this is throwing down sigil, and anything else you do is auto swapping back to your wand scepter. So we're never actually casting with our wand because we are setting all of our spells here to only cast with weapon set 1, which is our wand scepter, right? So we have our Fusillade to only cast with 1, Flame Wall, Frostbolt, Frostwall, and Lightning Warp all are only casting with weapon set 1, right? So now any spell, and I can even do it with, oh no, I can't with Volatile Dead because that's using our wand, but I'm not really casting Volatile Dead. That's like a sort of like a mute point. It's just on the wand. But basically, you know, as soon as I'm doing, you know, I'm fighting, I'm doing whatever, as soon as you cast Sigil, it'll auto swap to the staff, right? Now, literally anything else I press, it will instantly pull my wand scepter back out. So it's like, this is a way to set up the automatic whip swap and just get a massive amount of extra DPS and defensives out of casting out of your sigil. So continually be looking to scale up your chiming staff in your offhand as well. Coming to our like full actual weapon set here, we looked at our scepter already. The main thing we are looking for on our wand, which we talked about a little bit, is this gain percentage of extra damage. Now the wand type isn't really going to matter. Like I just mentioned, in my rotation, I'm almost never casting Volatile Dead. If you did have to pick one, I would say Volatile Dead and the mana pull one to give you mana back are probably like the best wand effects, but it doesn't really matter. Volatile Dead has some nice synergy because it's fire, and so it scales with all the elemental damage and stuff we're doing, and so if you had to kind of pick an offensive one, that would be the one to do. But I kind of have these in here as placeholders, and I hardly ever cast it. I more cast it just for fun because we're getting, you know, it's a little bit like an afterthought. But going back to the wand stats, what we're really after is this gain percentage of extra damage. So you want one, if not multiple of these rolls, kind of as high in the window as you can get them. And then kind of the next highest value, especially as we're getting into endgame and our mana is getting good, is plus skills, plus ranks to skills. What is it? Is plus extra skill ranks. And you can, you know, if you find it like a fire version or a cold version, those are good. But if you can get it plus levels to all skill ranks, that's just going to give you a really big amount of DPS scaling. The problem with that is it's going to really increase the mana cost quite a bit beyond where you're at because it's putting those extra levels on there. And so that's probably going to be more and more effective the deeper we get into endgame, and the kind of the more scaled up our mana and stuff is, kind of the easier it's going to be to take on those extra levels and not feel it in our mana with Archmage active, which is kind of like a thing that pulls a ton of mana itself, right? And so that's just something to consider. If you do have a weapon with a bunch of extra spell levels and it's like really mana heavy, consider just like trying Archmage off or something like that for a little bit. But you know, in the end, I think what's going to give us the most DPS increase are those two rolls: a gain percentage of extra on damage roll and a gain spell ranks roll is going to, you know, kind of really boost the floor of the damage. And the gain on extra is getting like put on at the end of the damage equation. So that's why we're building so heavily into it with all the monk stuff. Like we have the 24% there, we have the 10% here, we're gonna have the 10% here. We had this most of the time leveling up. We got 5% here, we got 5% here. So we're just looking at a big juicy amount of, oh, and then we have what did we say? We're at like 70 something percent extra from our Archmage, right? So we have a crazy amount of damage as extra coming through, and that's going to do wonders for our DPS. So beyond that, looking at our rolls here, and this is like a little more in general as well, we're looking for max mana, we're looking for mana regen, we're looking for int, and offensive rolls, like on wand, we are looking for cast speed. So cast speed is another really powerful offensive one that we're looking to build kind of across the board, and that's going to make our fusillade and basically everything we're doing just feel kind of a lot more fluid, a lot better. And the faster your move speed and the faster your cast speed, the more fluid this is going to feel, right? So the move speed combined with the cast speed, which is why I really try to prio move speed on boots. I finally had to drop my weak move speed boots for this upgraded one because I just needed the stats and the resist and everything, and these are too juicy. So I'm going a little slower now, but you know, it still feels fine. But basically, the faster you're cruising on the ground and the faster your cast speed is, the faster you can kind of just auto cruise build these up, and you're just going to be, you know, kind of going turbo with the fusillade. So coming over to, we covered our weapons, we talked about the scepter already. Coming to, let's just look at our 4 kind of big armor pieces. And we talked about this at the beginning. I recommend going energy shield as we level up. As we're coming into around this point in the game, end of Cruel, first bit of mapping in endgame, you want to look to be transitioning over to energy shield evasion, needing the dex combined with int. And we want to just basically get as big of rolls on those as we can for all 4 of these pieces. So we want to look for as high of item level pieces we can find, and then we want to look for this % increased evasion and energy roll, and we also want to look for this +2 evasion and +2 max energy shield. So the ideal would be on every one of these pieces we have a good +2 evasion rating combined with energy shield, which is 1 roll. If we look, it's a tier 3 roll on this one, right? It's kind of in one chunk, counts as like 1 affix. And we want to complement that with the % increase. So having those 2 together is what's really going to help scale the value of the evasion energy shield. So as far as defensives on the 4 armor pieces, those are kind of the core things you're looking for. You want either a big percentage to evasion energy shield roll, or a big +2 evasion energy shield roll, or both together, like we have on these gloves, and that's going to give you really big value for the scaling of your defenses. And we can see on our chest piece, we have just the percentage at 30%. On our headpiece, we have the percentage at 37%. On our boots, we have just +50 to evasion. Oh no, we have both in here as well. So we have 50 to evasion, 22 to energy shield as the first roll, and then we also have a 31% increase as well. So when you're looking at kind of the defensive stats, that's the main thing you want to prioritize. We can see I have max life on these boots. That's not bad, but it's not necessarily something you want to prioritize. What you really want to prio is max mana, because max mana is not only going to help our mana regen feel better, because it seems like the regen is based on, percentage of the regen is based on like the total pool. So like the bigger the total pool is, the further that percentage of regen goes, right? So scaling max mana almost has like double synergy, it seems like, with the regen. But beyond that, like why it's really important is every extra 100 mana we build is going to scale our Archmage that much higher. And so we calculated earlier, it was like what, 72% or something we were at right now from, or 76% from almost 1300 extra mana, and getting 6% of that every 100 mana. So basically the mana, it's not only going to help scale the damage of Archmage, it's also going to help Archmage feel better because of, you know, just having the bigger pool, and the fact that the % regen is going to help be like constantly filling up that bigger pool faster, right? To complement that, besides getting like going for big max manas like on the top on the prefix, we also want to look for % mana regen on the suffix whenever we can find it. So you're kind of always looking for max mana on the top, and you're always looking for mana regen on the bottom for basically everything. And so those are both of those roles you're always going to want on kind of anywhere you can find them. So constantly be looking for max mana on the top, % mana regen on the bottom. If you can get both, that's a huge winner, right? Coming into your early endgame mapping, something that's going to start to become really important, that's not nearly as important leveling up through the whole Act 1 through 3 and then Cruel, is going to be elemental resistances. So I really started to feel this at the beginning of that stream. I died a couple times to just random elemental effects like fire ground and stuff I couldn't see, because I had like negative 28% fire resist, just taking so much extra damage from the elements. And so something you want to start looking for as you're getting into endgame mapping are these elemental resist rolls, because it seems like gear is pretty much the only place you can get these. And so this chest was huge for us, because this really helped our fire resist get us at least almost to 0. We're in -1 right now. But you can see all these pieces I picked up, or most of them at least, have some amount of elemental resist. So when you're looking at the suffixes on the bottom, the last three, you really want to be looking for the mana regen like we talked about, but you also want to be looking for those resistances. Literally, like any of the elemental resistances or chaos resistance that you can find on any of these pieces, you want to go ahead and lock those in and go with them. 34 cold resist here on the gloves, an extra 16 on the boots, 32 fire, and another 15 cold on the chest. And then we're picking same thing with like, your rings and stuff. So we got 21 on the lightning for our ring. We got another 25 lightning over here. And then you can get big ones on your belt as well. So a belt is another big place. It's like kind of free, if you know what I mean. Like you can't get crazy stats on your belt, but some really big ones you can get that you maybe want to prio less on other pieces where you can roll better stuff are the resists. You can get 3 giant elemental resists on the bottom of a good belt. I do think probably the best belt in general is going to be the increased mana recovery from flasks. I was trying different ones. I just recently put this one on with this kind of gear upgrade I did sorting through my stash. But you can see huge max mana roll here, right? Tier 10 max mana roll, big max mana roll on our helm. We got quite a few good max mana rolls coming through on our different pieces. But this was just going to help with our mana with Archmage as we're chugging our flask constantly, like churning through that mana. And yeah, just basically looking for the resistances is going to be the main thing on the belt. And so I hope that kind of like it gives you a good understanding of what stats and stuff you're kind of trying to prio on your 4 main pieces on your belt. We kind of talked about only needing these unset rings once you are getting into endgame and having enough spirit to run these final 2 cast and minion deaths. Other good ring options up to that point are like the cast speed one, the rarity one, rarity, another just good stat in general to help you scale up, especially if you like, self-crafting and kind of building your own gear like I do. The rarity is going to go a really long way, which is why I didn't get this till later on, but eventually when I got a Dawnlit Charm, I carry it around and have it on most of the time, and we'll basically swap to stun if stuff's looking sketchy, and I'll swap to freeze if anything has frozen around. So it's like basically if I'm pushing content that's hard, I got Stun Charm in. If I'm chilling and farming, I got Loot Charm in with the rarity. And if anything has freeze anywhere, I throw in Thawing Charm, because I've died more to freeze than literally anything else in the game by a good chunk. So it's like the boss one-shot mechanics that I fail to dodge, and freezing is basically what has killed me so far for the most part. So that's kind of what you want to do for your charm slot. And obviously if you get a charm slot roll on the belt, that's really good because you can run multiple of those in tandem, right? So ideally if you were able to get a +2 charm roll on your belt, you could have all 3 in, which would be goated. I think you could do that. I haven't seen a belt with +3. I did get one with +1, but I assume you can get a higher tier roll and get another one from that. But I'm not positive. But jumping back to the rings real quick, we're looking for like the same exact stats. So if you can get any extra evasion, any extra energy shield, any max mana, max life doesn't hurt, and then resistances or mana regen on the bottom, these rings are certainly not perfect. Like this accuracy and the physical damage to attacks at the top is doing nothing, but they both have good base evasion rating, right? +99 on this one, +77 on this one, extra 22 int here, that's big. 25 lightning resist, that's big. Another 14% mana regen, not huge, but definitely not bad. Coming over here, like probably a slightly better looking ring in my opinion. The only one we're not really getting value from on this side is the leech physical attack damage is life. That's doing nothing for us. And the max life is very minimal, but we got, 4 other really good rolls here. We got the 77 evasion, 88 max mana, 21 lightning resist, 43 mana regen. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for on rings. Same exact thing on amulet. After you kind of prioritizing the spirit, getting a solar amulet with another good spirit roll, or some other type of base amulet if it also has a max spirit roll. Trying to just kind of, or if you don't need spirit, you look to other options, but we can use our amulet to cover a big chunk of our spirit along with a good roll on our chest and our scepter, right? Kind of the big 3 spirit pieces we looked at the beginning of the gear section. And you're looking for the same kind of rolls here. So any extra attributes you need, any percent, mana regen. That's the other thing, is you want to be looking for big intelligence on these pieces too. And you can settle for other stats, but I would rather both of these strengths be intelligence. And if everything's kind of int, you can use these passive nodes to adjust accordingly for the extra dex and strength you need to run your skill gems, right? So as a kind of a baseline thing to default to, always look for int on gear, because you can't change the roll on your gear, but you can constantly adjust these attribute nodes around, and we start to have quite a few of them. So we can see, I'm getting a very big amount of my dexterity from the attributes because I have basically no dexterity on my gear. I have a good int and I have a couple random strength rolls where, you know, you can basically build full into int, and then we can, and int is also going to increase our max mana pool, which is also going to scale the damage of Archmage, which is also going to scale the damage of our elemental discharge, proccing from our lightning warp consuming ailments. So yeah, just really good synergy there. All right, last thing is just like flasks. I think kind of go with, you know, whatever you're feeling here. My favorites are just the increased amount recovered and the increased charges. Like 2 good rolls on those, I just think are kind of the highest value because it lets you use it more often, carry more into like boss fights, as well as just giving you higher value off the actual use of it. So I kind of shoot for those 2, but really, you know, whatever you're feeling or whatever you think is good for your mana and life flask, and that pretty much wraps it up for gear, I think. Boom, baby. So that's pretty much all I got for the leveling build guide for the Meta Magic Monk, the Wizard, the Comet Invoker is maybe what we're going to be calling it now. But I'm super excited to bring you guys this video. I've been having a ton of fun working on this build after kind of playing the Sork version for a bit. I'm definitely still playing the Sork version, so I'm going to basically be taking both of these builds into endgame now in tandem and pushing endgame maps probably kind of in different directions on them. And so I'm going to be live streaming a good chunk of that journey either on this channel or a new channel if I make it, but I'm going to be, you know, doing my very best to try to get more live gameplay out there to you so you can kind of see the build as it's progressing. And, you know, I want to show you as much as you can before you invest any resources yourself into it, right? So I want to make sure you fully understand what you're getting yourself into, make sure you really like it, make sure it's something you want to commit to before you got to do that. So I'll continue that journey into endgame. And then from there, once we kind of get deeper and, you know, maybe these builds are in more of a final form, I'll be looking to play every other class, do a bunch of more builds. Like, I love this stuff. This is my juice, my kind of game. And the tools I've been looking for in games like Diablo 4 and stuff, like, they're finally at my disposal. And so I think I'm going to be kind of sunk in here for a while. And I'm couldn't be happier. I'm having a blast out here in raid class. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having an excellent time adventuring out there as well in early access. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback on how the build looks, be sure to leave those in the comments and let me know. I try to check out all those and respond to any questions and stuff like that. And if you have any cool ideas or things you might work, I love seeing that kind of stuff because, you know, that's the kind of stuff I can test. If you have any questions you want to talk to me about live, try to stop by the live stream. I'll also put my Twitch link in the description, and I will eventually be trying to dual stream on that as well, but I got to finish getting the PC set up to get Streamlabs up and everything for that. But yeah, I'm going to be doing my best to streaming these builds to give you guys more visibility into them. There's also a Mobalytics link in the description that I'm going to keep updated. So if you want to stay kind of up to date on what I'm changing daily, I would save that link, like either favorite it in Mobalytics or like just save the link in your browser, because that's kind of, you're going to be your best reference point to kind of see where it's at and kind of what the current state of it is. And I'm going to be doing that not only for the Comet Invoker Monk, I'm going to be also doing that for the Frostfire Fusillade Sork variation of the build. So if you think this build is fun on Monk, you will also really enjoy the Sork variation, Elemental Storm Stormweaver, because it's a very similar feeling build with some distinct differences. We're playing much more around Area of Effect, Elemental Storm crit, creating a huge death zone with our Solar Orb Frost Bomb, and kind of constantly kiting through that, still doing the Ember Fusillade Flame Wall stuff. So instead of kind of the freeze projectile stuff, we're going more for the crit Elemental Storm, but we still have the core of Ember Fusillade, Firewall, Spirits, and the cast on minion death, just bringing down huge Firestorm comets all the time. So that was literally what inspired me to, you know, I had just ascended into Invoker Monk on this guy using a quarterstaff, just testing stuff out. And as soon as I got to that point on my Sorceress where I realized this potential with the meta energy in this tree, I was like, dude, I might have to convert this guy over and go the rest of the way as a wizard. And that's basically exactly what happened. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you, and take care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Have fun blasting out there in raid class. Peace out.